Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast, number 84. I'm Steve Smith, and with Brandon Flanagan. We're at the FM Tennis Performance Center in Boynton Beach, Florida. We're going to interview Mark Spann. Lifetime in tennis. He could talk to us from A to Z. I think it was in 2019. His mother, former Ann Shilka, passed away. And I said, "Hey, Mark, why don't you, write something or send me some notes, and I'll write it." So I think this could be a two-part series. Let's just start with Mark and ask him his journey in tennis. And now he is a co-owner of a club in Philadelphia, Upper Dublin. Working backwards, I think he's had that, I'm going to guess, 12, 13 years. He worked for Julian Krinsky for 25. And then he worked for his mother, spans of tennis, teaching tennis in South Africa. But he was also a student at Tennis Tech. He played on the team at a time where I ran the team for a semester on an interim basis with Craig Tiley and Dave Anderson. But yeah, let's get Mark on the phone now. There's so many stories, so many fun things to talk about. Flanagan, why don't you sing a song while I call him up?
Here's a very, very brief Julian Krinsky story. A family and a young boy that I've coached down here for many years. At the moment, not coaching him, but still good friends with the family. And I'd asked them to come and be part of this promotional video for our performance center. And the father, Adam, no longer plays, but he was doing some demos and hitting into our kind of hitting lane area with the tennis court. And he grew up going to Julian Krinsky camps in Philadelphia. He's got a pretty clean forehand, so I wonder if Mark had a little bit to do with his instruction growing up.
Well, I worked 25 years with Julian. That's a great learning experience on the court, off the court. Dialing for dollars. This is the nervous part. Got one ring.
Hello.
Mark Spann.
Hey, Mark.
Steve Smith.
And
Hey, Brandon.
Brandon
How's it
Flanagan.
going?
Yeah.
Hey, guys.
That was very dramatic. That was a dramatic opening there.
What's that?
That was a very dramatic kind of introduction from Steve.
We have some history.
Yeah.
Called him Marky Baby Spann. Get over
No,
here,
thank you.
Spann. With my father, a close friend of his, he got married, and his wife started calling my father Jimmy Baby. Nobody called my father Jimmy Baby, but I call people like Marky Baby. Anyway, great to have you on the podcast. With
Thank you.
Number 84. You've listened to a few of these marathon sessions we've had, huh?
I have.
With
I like to go back to the well.
With let's start with the beginning days where Marky Baby was hitting balls in South Africa. Tell us about your start in tennis.
When you have a mother who played as much tennis as mine did, I think I sort of grew up to the sound of tennis balls being hit. We had a tennis court at home, and she was actually pretty smart. She had me play every sport I could lay my hands on. So back then, cricket was very popular, rugby, soccer. Used to play a lot of those sports, and actually took a lot of pressure off playing tennis. But of course, having had the background of a mother who played as much as mine did, I found myself on the court at about 5. But I was probably the most difficult kid to teach. First part didn't go particularly well.
What makes you say you were difficult to teach?
I was normally the kid disrupting the others. So we used to learn in groups. And I think I spent a lot of my time in the penalty box or whatever they called it in those days. But wasn't the greatest student at the beginning.
In what city was your mother based in?
Johannesburg, which is now Gauteng.
Yeah.
So Played a lot as a junior. The school I went to, we used to have the holidays didn't coincide with the tournament. So actually, as a kid, I didn't play too many tournaments until I was like 12 or 13, and then really started to get into it. But because I played a lot of the other sports, probably didn't spend as much time playing tennis as I could have. But by the time I got to 14 or 15, winning most of the matches I played. But then actually left to go to boarding school and went to school in a place called Bloemfontein. And quite honestly, we had 6 tennis courts and tennis was like a non-sport. So we used to actually get a group of us together. There were 3 or 4 actually really good players at our school, but everybody had to play rugby where we were. So rugby was the big sport. So actually kind of took a break on my tennis for 2 or 3 years. Got to 18 and thought, what have I done? So actually that was round about then I met Craig Tiley, who was kind of helping put a lot of the satellite tournaments, and probably the only exposure we had in those days was the satellite tournaments, and he used to play in them and run them. He used to assist in putting them together, but that kind of got me back into tennis.
I remember you telling me that Tiley, if say he lost in the tournament early, he would stay to the bitter end, helping run the tournament. But back up.
Ironic.
I'm sorry. Hold that thought. But back up. Tell us a little bit more about the boarding schools. All boys, pretty disciplined.
All boys. Very, very strict sport on Sundays. It was a good move for me. I was kind of struggling a little bit when I had too many things to do, and I think boarding school focused me a lot more. So that was a good move.
Pretty formal, coat and tie everywhere, and the whole 9 yards.
Yep, coat and tie everywhere, and we were, I think, the only English-speaking school there. Afrikaans was the other prominent language, and you just when you left the school property, you had to be careful. Being one of the few English people in the town. I mean, I probably embellish it, but it's kind of interesting. We used to be a little scared when we left the school premises.
Is that being a privileged preppy? I mean, because it was more affluent kids?
It was actually a government school that used to be a private school. So it had a lot of the amenities, but it was a very small school. It was a great experience.
Yeah, I think the discipline, perhaps it's changed from the days where you and I were in prep school, but I think it was great. I look back upon that going away, it was a super experience. I interrupted you. You said, ironically, talking about the satellites and Craig Tiley.
Yeah, I was actually, when Craig was there, Frank Hammond. Remember Frank Hammond, who defaulted, was it McEnroe?
It was Nastasi playing against McEnroe, wasn't it? 79?
Or was it McEnroe against Wielander?
Well, I remember.
I forget.
I remember at the New York, in the U.S. Open in New York. I should have gone, had tickets, but I stayed at the old Roosevelt watching films. The late Eve Craft said, "Hey, if you want to just come in here tonight, and look at films." We were doing that, but I think it was Frank Hammond defaulted Nastasi, and he later came back. Mike Blanchard came back and he reinstated. So he was defaulted, and he put him back in the match. And I think one of the side stories to that is after the match, McEnroe and Nastasi were just going at it in the locker room. Nastasi said, "Hey, you want to go have dinner?" And young McEnroe said, "Yeah, okay." So they went to dinner afterwards.
Yeah. So I think even back in those days, Craig had really started to pick his course because he was really he was involved in everything to do with organizing. So
actually, there was a South African by the name of Daryl Weiss.
Yep.
And they did you know Daryl?
I knew Daryl. Actually bought his rackets off him.
That's right. So he was in the army, the South African army, with Tiley. And that's how Tiley was convinced to go to Tennis Tech.
Yep. And then actually Tiley was the one who told me about Tennis Tech. So
did you do a stint in the army?
No, I did not. I did not.
That was mandatory at the time, unless you were in school. How did that play out?
No, I was actually I was English. I was never South African. So I was actually an English citizen, so to speak. I was actually born in England and lived in South Africa for various periods, like as a kid.
Well, I know your mother. We're going to talk a lot about your mother, but she's also born in England. But a lot of people don't know this about Virginia Wade. Before she had her second birthday, she moved to South Africa from England. So she spent the first 15 years of her life in South Africa. So
I did not know that.
I think the sunshine of South Africa. I mean, she became a Wimbledon champion. But
Yep.
yeah, Virginia Wade is also, like your mother. She's English, but she was spent many years in South Africa. But she's unlike your mother. She spent her formative years in South Africa. With tell us, get going with. I guess we'll come back to your mom, but. So how many years had you taught for your mom? I mean, you were a child tennis teacher, correct?
Yeah, pretty much when I came out of school, she it was sort of, if you're not going to college yet, you're going to learn something. So she put me on the court with her. And I can just remember being so painfully shy, I couldn't even say hello to people. And actually overheard my mother once, one of her friends saying to her, "You can't do that to your son," just because I really found it very hard to communicate, back in those days. And actually the thing that changed it for me was I came out in, I think, 1982 to spend 3 weeks with Dennis Vandermeer, doing the PTR. And I literally knew within maybe half a day that this was what I wanted to do. After I saw his ability to teach and the dynamics and just the scope, of tennis. And the way that in those days, I think it was about 10 days to do the PTR. I think now it takes about a day, if that.
No, it was the university. It was a 10-day program. Yeah, no, I have fond memories going through Vandermeer's program.
And in those days, he did the whole thing himself. So it was really, part of it was his information, but a lot of it was obviously his presentation. Mm-hmm. And he was fascinating. Really, really inspired me.
No, great speaker. The group dynamic skills. We've dedicated a podcast or two to Dennis. They're not to be duplicated. They're the one and only. Amazing individual.
So his ability to remember names and to remember strokes, all I can remember is him having his back to the video monitor as he went through every single person, looked at them, said their name, and told them what they were working on with his, whichever stroke he happened to pick. But back in those days, it was literally like magic. It was very impressive.
Yeah. He would generally do the serve. He would take 36 students, and he would, for the listeners, he would know their name, and he wouldn't look backwards. And he knew the time of how long they would be on the film.
Yeah, that was amazing.
And then he would say what their flaw was, and then give them a quick correction, and and didn't stop. And then but at that point, he had everybody right in the palm of his hand. I mean, just amazing showman.
No, it was amazing.
So your mother,
really incredible.
Your mother was a tennis player, then a tennis teacher?
Yeah, she was a tennis player. She actually had a skiing accident pretty soon. I think she won the doubles back in '55 at Wimbledon. And then just after that, she had a skiing accident and actually lost her kneecap. The sad thing is nowadays, I think they would have just scraped your knee. It'd be like a minor procedure. In those days, they literally, they took a whole kneecap out. So she continued to play, like in a brace, but definitely, couldn't play at that same level. Came to South Africa. My dad was in the Royal Navy, and they actually met. They didn't know each other, and their best friends were marrying each other. They met at the wedding. My dad went to sea for 6 months, and then I think they got married shortly after that. It was kind of a cool story. But then they both decided to immigrate, to move to South Africa. And, then we would go backwards and forwards, have a sister as well. So, all the family was in England. So we used to spend some time in England and out to South Africa. So she started coaching almost immediately, to kind of support the family. and just really, really got very, very excited about coaching.
And that
Very excited about coaching.
And that coaching was done on the court. You said you guys had a court at your place?
Yeah, we had a court at home, and I, for whatever reason, back in those days, I mean, probably 1 out of every 3 houses had a tennis court. I mean, it's crazy. Like, even when I go back there now, everybody used to. I mean, people stopped building tennis courts at some stage, but in those days, everybody had a tennis court and a swimming pool. It was just a lot of tennis courts.
Spans of tennis. That's what she called her program, right?
Spans of tennis. And my sister now actually continues to run Spans of Tennis many years later.
Oh, that's great.
In Johannesburg or another part of it?
In Johannesburg, yeah.
I know, Mark, I could tell you a little bit about my 2-day workshop with the USPTA, getting my certification. When you think of that 10-day course with Dennis Vandermeer, and you think of the different exercises or presentations, the curriculum, what are some other memories from that course that stick out?
How everybody was involved. I mean, they even ran a tournament, like at the end that everybody was involved in. So much of it was, really trying to see, obviously from, I remember old Dennis was a racket back and down, thumb to thigh. Of course, he had all his like key sayings, and you had to study those, and you had to have all the checkpoints, for the exam, which, I'd have to say after Braden, a lot of those disappeared. But I think to this day, probably the most powerful thing that I took from Dennis was the group dynamics. His ability to handle a group of people, to teach them, just the way he used to organize people and orchestrate it.
I think corrective measures as well. Dennis, I did that just today, helping a boy with a serve and just put a ball under his heel. So he's on the ball of his foot, knee is flexed to just help, rotation from the ground up.
Yeah.
But with Vandermeer, what we could do if we studied Braden, for example, is you could use, the science from Braden and use it with the Vandermeer progressions.
Yeah.
So very well structured, the group lessons. For you.
Actually, the graduated length method, that was one of the things that really stuck with me over the years. And then when you actually saw the evolution of, like red ball, orange ball, green ball, a lot of that was really based on changing the size of the court, changing the size of the stroke based on where you were on the court.
Yeah,
to make it either easier or
size of the court, size of the racket, and size of the. There's one more.
Yep.
Size of the stroke, size of the court, and size of the. I'm drawing a blank here. The racket, the racket. Yeah, it was the racket and the court and the stroke. So Dennis would do the mini tennis, and a term from ice hockey, you'd have the players face off. So they put the rackets, they'd line the rackets up, and everybody would have an Eastern grip. Mm. And then he would say back up, and you go, okay, boopity boop, and then he'd put 2 tennis balls, and then his thing, trickery, he'd get people to hit over the net. At first, you're just trying to aim over 1 tennis ball, just touching the ball. And then 2 tennis balls, and then he'd place them over the net. But he could start with as many people as he wanted on a tennis court.
Yeah.
So 10 days with
very well organized.
10 days with Tennis University. We added that at Tennis Tech. That was 365 times 2, so 730 days plus the summer internship.
Yep.
So 82, you went back, and then. You came to you asked to go to Tennis Tech, what, 85, 86?
86, yeah. 86.
With
and I still remember that first day, Steve, arriving with my racket bag with 6 rackets in the back. And you saying to me, what did you bring all those rackets for? I was like, isn't this the tennis teaching program? And you said, yep, you're not going to need those.
Actually, though, I was there for all of the 80s, a decade, and I think it was Fred Niffen, then Robert Cox, and then John Peterson.
Yeah.
So, you played. You played well enough to be in the top 6. I know it was like an immigration center. I think when you played, there was just one American between the top
Scott Stewart,
top 6 in the boys, top 6 in the girls. Scott Stewart. He's out in West Texas. He actually Carmen Clark. Chad Clark.
One of the best parts of that experience was actually you and Tylee were coaching the team, and that was really I can remember that was I learned a lot from that.
Yeah, Anderson as well. The three of us, because we really were. I was highly motivated to have the team become part of the Tennis Tech program. I was told when I started, for every 20 students, we would have another full-time faculty member. But I was just there by myself. I shouldn't say it that way, but I was the only full-time faculty member. So that's where the peer teaching, students teaching students. But years later, I was leading a junior college program, and it was at the Nationals. And John Peterson, players coach, everybody loved him. He was very successful. He's in a bunch of Hall of Fames. So he said, well, who did you recommend to be the coach at Tyler Junior College? Of course, he didn't get an interview. And I said, Craig Tiley. And Peterson said, I think he would have done a good job. Because, he followed in the footsteps of Jennifer Roberts. Was she at Tennis Tech when you were there?
No, she wasn't, but she did come back to lecture a couple of times.
Okay, so, yeah, she went there first. And he went director of instruction, and it just opened up where on an interim basis he was the men's coach, and they went from, I would say, obscurity to winning the national championship.
Yep.
So between 82 and 86, you were just back home working with your mom?
Yeah, I was back working. My mom used to travel on, whenever I could, would travel on the satellite circuit, did a lot of coaching courses. But I think after going to Dennis, it was just like, this is what you're going to do. And I think to my mother's credit was like, if this is what you're going to do, then you're going to study. And, best thing she ever did was send me to study under you for 2 years, where I learned I didn't know a whole lot. It's amazing how much you need to know before you realize how little you know.
And I was a really nice guy about it too.
Actually, you were sweet.
Actually, I remember Tylee. Militant's a very strong word. People throw that my way all the time, but just part of the South African culture. I remember Tylee being on the other side of the net and just waving the kid up to the net. So then I reprimanded him for that. I said, "No, you go to the kid, and you run over her." And so I remember telling Tylee, I said, "You didn't charge for lessons before, did you?" And I said, give it a month, and I'll let you know that, or you'll tell me that the people that you've taught in the past, you need to find a way to refund those people. The program was so large by the time you got there. I remember it was
about 88 people. Yeah.
My first experience with Tylee was I played him. I didn't play all the time, but I played in the Tennis Tech close. So I played him when there was a bunch of rain delays. You play, you have to roll dry the court, and you play. And because actually the program was so large that it was the first year students. It's not like I really got to know them that well. It was such a large program. But by the time somebody was there 2 years, I did know them, but it was a matter of, I wouldn't say it was so much on the relationship side. I knew what their work ethic was and their organizational skills. And
now, trust me, Steve, we all felt like we got to know you.
But before you came to Tennis Tech or after? We have to talk about Julian Krinsky. We could talk about Tennis Tech.
Well, actually, no. Julian was. I bumped into Julian in about 1983, and he was giving a lecture in South Africa. And he said to me, "Why don't you come out and see what American tennis is all about and American camps?" And that was actually my first stop before I came to Tyler. I went to go work with him, and that's a funny story. My mother was very, very, like in her teaching, was very, very strict and very precise. And nobody ever explained to me that when kids play tennis for 30 hours a week, they don't really, really want to have a dissertation on every, part of hitting a forehand and a backhand and footwork. And I used to teach the living bejeebies out of these kids. And then I realized every break there was like a line outside of Julian's office, because they were all requesting to get off my court. And after about 2 weeks, Julian had to talk to me because so many kids just didn't want to be taught by me. And I remember saying to him, you know what, Julian, this is not for me. And, actually had kept in contact with Dennis, who knew my mom. And I was like, I think I'm going to, me and my sister, because we both came out together, we're going to go and try something different. And then for whatever reason, Julian was like, no, you just got a couple of things to learn. And, that was getting broken in my first experience was quite a rough one.
Oh, Julian, a brilliant man in so many ways.
Yep.
I tell people you got to be careful of an acronym, though. I was hired by Julian to train the coaches. I know you did that. Probably for every summer I did it, you did it, maybe 5, 10.
Yep.
It had to be one of the largest camps in the U.S., like 60 plus coaches.
I think we were in Tennis Magazine. I think it was either rated as top 3 camps or top 3 biggest camps. I forget, but there was a stage we had 55 coaches. And we used to run like a 3 or 4 day seminar, before, where all the coaches would come in. And, we're trying to train them in every facet of what they were going to do, from the time they got up to the, to the end of the week.
Back to acronyms, JKST, just knowledge short of the truth, just killing students' time, Jewish kibbutz, securing treasure. With Brandon's got an FM. I think people could figure out why they couldn't call themselves MF. His partner, his partner, Allington, is British. The tennis tech program with your mother. This is an amazing story. A Wimbledon champion. But you went back and you took the information. You're maybe just in your early 20s, right? I'm sure you were 20 by then, right?
Yep.
So you went back to South Africa, and your mother was so open to change. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. She always felt like, with her coaching, she was very passionate, but she used to get very frustrated because she always felt people could, improve quick. And I always remember the one time we were teaching and we were trying to get people to point the tip of the racket where the ball went. So really focusing, which was really a continental role, I guess, in those days. And I just remember her being very, I don't know, she used to get very frustrated. And I remember I was saying to her, Mom, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And she was right. She's like, I know, but it's what everybody's teaching. And actually, I would say the thing that my mom felt the strongest about, she used the phrase more and more after meeting Vic, was that the enemy of the great teacher was perpetuation. As in, I teach as my forefathers teach. And I think that, for somebody like herself who was very hungry for knowledge and information, when I came back after my first year at Tennis Tech, I just basically, all the information I had, she must have read my folders and my file, I don't know how many times, over and over and over. And, got to the stage where she realized that a lot of the information was Braden. And she kind of knew Vic from back in the day, I guess from the barnstorming days. They knew each other. But she got to the stage where she had studied Tennis for the Future so intensely. I think she wrote about 12 exams on it. She'd have all these exams. And we got to a stage where every Monday, coaches from all over Johannesburg used to come out to the house. She would make them lunch and she would share information. And that's really what she became very, very strong about, was she felt that everybody should be a student of the game, whether you were a coach, player, and was really trying to educate people. And, got to the stage where if you looked at our tennis court at home, I mean, we had all those tennis partners, which I guess, like your, the practice backboard that you have. Mm-hmm. We used to have about 6 of them next to the court where kids would come and practice. On the wall, on the fences, she would have balls put out in the shape of a swing. The courts were marked, with a lot of like the 19.6 degrees, the difference between cross court down the line. It just became, our tennis court became a teaching center. And I think Vic really, really opened up her eyes in terms of what could be taught and how powerful information was.
Now, I remember corresponding with your mom and talking to her. I remember when she said, I know that you have studied Vic Braden and memorized it word for word. And But for me, I mean, obviously, I was like everyone. Vic came into the living room in the '70s with those PBS clips, and then his book came out in '77. There were some other instructional tapes prior to that that he had, but we used his books as textbooks, and I used to test the students like your mother. I mean, okay, all right, we've gone through this. Let's best by test. Let's go through this if you know the information.
Yeah.
And then with so for me, I have to think Angela Buxton is another Wimbledon champion who played at the same time your mother did. She spent 6 weeks with Dave Anderson and myself back in Boca Raton at the former Seguzo Bassett Tennis Academy, which is now Everett's. And It was sponsored by Rover, and she brought about a small group of 8 players. Of course, there's always a little bit of a snag. There was a girl on the squad who had been taught by her mom. And anyway, Angela Buxton, I remember sitting down with Robbie Seguzo, who was a Wimbledon champion, and said, "You need to learn this information." And then what she said is that, unfortunately, you and I are Wimbledon champions. People know who you are now. But when you're my age, people don't remember the doubles champions, just the singles champions.
Yep.
But for me, coming into the game from, the snowbanks, upstate New York, late to the game, and to, have a Wimbledon champion tell you that, okay, this influence, I'm changed how I teach tennis.
Yeah. When I think back, I think your story of how you got into tennis, if I'm correct, was that you realized you weren't going to make it as a hockey player. You changed to tennis. You try to find the greatest coaches you could to help you, and realized that the information was very contradictory. And actually, her story was very similar. She lived about 2 hours away from Wimbledon. The best coach in those days, I think, was at Wimbledon. She used to get on a train, go 2 hours up to Wimbledon, play with the coach for an hour, and then go back 2 hours. And that was basically her routine day after day. And when she looked back later on, she was like, she had a really good forehand. And I think she felt she got changed back into a continental. So that was like one of her things, in terms of coaching and following information. She kind of realized that something that was really good changed to something different, but it really didn't need to. And I think that really motivated her, when it came to getting to the truth of strokes and technique and physics. And
yeah, that's a point we make about Welby Van Horn. I don't know anyone who taught beginners better than Welby's balance method, but he would refer to the beginner's grip, the Eastern grip on the forehand, and then the championship grip wasn't a true continental. It was, the old Australian grip, what we call a composite today. But I remember being in the nursing home, and he said, "What a mistake." But that's back when, by the second week of Wimbledon, with the wooden rackets, people were playing on grass, and they'd be wearing spikes, and they didn't want to let the ball bounce. But your mother grew up in a boarding school of boys as well, right?
She did, actually. It was during the Second World War, had 3 sisters, and she could not get anybody to play. Nobody would play tennis with her. So she used to go out every day and put down cans and just serve. Supposedly, she used to say that she had the fastest serve in the world out of the women because she had hit so many serves, but she used to serve after serve after serve, and that was the main part of her practice.
Yeah, people don't understand about myelin. You help somebody with their serve, but they got to put in the reps.
Got to put in the reps.
It's going to help myelin's the speed and smoothness of movement. You can't just give someone a half-hour lesson and they're ready to go bang the ball. They have to put in hours and hours of practice.
Yep.
So she taught right through the end of her life, correct?
She did. She taught probably up until the age of maybe 70. And until she got her grandkids, we couldn't figure out what she would, what she was going to do, because she used to spend so many hours on the court. Again, when I think back to being younger, the who's who of tennis used to come out to train with her. I think it was Ilana Kloss might have been one of them. Brenda Kirk, but like a lot of these people, she'd be out there practicing with them because she'd sort of got to the stage where she wasn't playing, but was very fascinated by statistics and strategy and so on.
And there must be just such a long list of coaches that she influenced. Stanford Boston was a USTA coach, and I was on the road with my son, and he was with the USTA coaches at that time, Connor. And Stanford said to me, my go-to guy is Mark Spann. Have you ever heard of him? How do you know Stanford? Did he work for your mom?
No, actually. So probably 1997, Jason Ware-Smith, he was a kid I coached when he was really, really young. Played for TCU, he was the number one doubles player. Jason asked me to travel with him and coach him on the tour, and his brother was training with Stanford down in Florida. And I think the other ones there were Marty Fish, Andy Roddick, Bo Hodges. I'm trying to think if the other player was actually the guy who played six on Tylee's team that when they won the NCAAs.
Graydon Oliver, maybe?
No, it wasn't Graydon.
Is it Michael Calkins?
Nope.
Mir Delic?
I remember he must have been a Jay Brain type because when I watched him play, when I think back, he was quite stiff, very, very methodical.
Chris Martin?
Yeah, it might have been Chris Martin. Might have been. But anyway, so I mean, when we used to go down there, so we'd go down there and practice periodically because there would also be a way of us getting some good practice in, and Jason getting to see his brother. But that was how I got to know Stanford, and we would talk tennis late into the night, and then over the years, a number of the tournaments and stuff, we would bump into each other. And great guy, very interesting the way he used to train players. I mean, just it was the whole package there. You could do you just have four players, and that's what he'd focus on.
And he's like yourself and a lot of South Africans. He has a rugby mentality, right? He's
he's from Cape Town, which
tough-minded.
He was very. I mean, he a very, very strong work ethic, and and I think at his house, everybody seemed to respect him, and he laid down the rules and ran a very tight ship. And ironically, I don't know if you saw Steve. Victor Lilov, Victor, and I think he's got Victor and one other kid that are now traveling with him.
Yeah. I've seen Victor play a couple times here recently. One thing out of humility, Stanford was working with Andy Roddick, and we have this film of Andy Roddick where he had a regress palm up, and the word his mother uses, his serve was pitiful. And Stan doesn't claim to have changed Andy's serve because Andy just put the racket in the salute position, abbreviated motion, out of frustration, and just started clocking serves. And that's how he started serving that way. I know that he's working with Victor. Tell us about Jason. I know you brought Jason to us one time. That was you said one of the highlights of your career at that point. Where,
well, actually, we came to you. He was playing in the second round of the Miami Open against Todd Woodbridge and Jonas Bjorkman. And they just won. They'd won the first set. Second set, they're up 5-4. He's playing with Neville Godwin, 5-4, 40-30. And there was an overhead. They just missed the overhead. About 45 minutes later, we were in the car driving up to you. I think looking at it, it was an incredible experience. But when you look at the difference between eating and not eating, based on how you perform and going from one week to the next, especially when you're a doubles player, is there's so much pressure, on those players to perform. And I mean, when they lost to Bjorkman and Woodbridge, Jason hit an overhead, must have missed it by half an inch. If it was in, they would have won the match. It would have been in the third round. Probably would have made enough money to be able to go through the next 6 months, expenses paid for, missed the overhead, and then you're driving out of there. And I think about a year after that, Jason actually quit, kind of stopped, but that would have been a great win for them. And
with Jason, you coached him for a number of years. I remember the highlight you said that was such a great treat to go back to Wimbledon, you're coaching Jason, and you're at Wimbledon with your mom. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Actually, he was playing with Katie Schluckerbier in the mixed doubles. And I think it was the second round. They'd just beaten Guy Eagle and Barbara Shett, I think it was. But they were the second seeds. And actually, my mom's sitting there as well. And of course, the best thing, I think, if you get through the second round, you get to spend the second week at Wimbledon. So it was really a very, my mom being English, having won, they made her a member. So it was almost like every year she would go back to Wimbledon, for the 2 weeks of Wimbledon, catch up with all her old buddies. But this was really very, very neat because she got to show me, like literally every nook and cranny of Wimbledon, like going in the back because I was able to get in there as a coach. And a lot of her stories and that's right. I guess when you realize a lot of this is just the experiences that these players had and the things they went through and the friendships they formed. But no, that was very special.
It reminds me of a handful of summers with Gavin Forbes. So your mother's first name bases with Rosewall and Emerson, that must have impressed you a little bit.
Yeah, we were shocked. Shocked. And that actually, that was in South Africa because we, during the apartheid era, like nobody could really come in or out. And I think one of the first events, was with Rosewall and Emerson. And, we walking along, they saw my mom, and I think they must have spent like 15, 20 minutes, it's like kind of catching up, and one realized like there was a lot of history there. But, especially to see Rosewall shouting, "Hey, Shilly," which was my mom's middle name, Shilcock. That was kind of special. Because, until that point, you just hear your mother saying to you, like, I played a lot of tennis, I won Wimbledon. You don't really know what it is, but you definitely knew who Ken Rosewall was.
Yeah.
And Roy Emerson. So that was pretty cool.
He was in the final in 1954 and then 1974. Never won, but he's
that's right, 20-year span.
A lefty who played right-handed, so he never had a great serve. Lillo, speaking of Wimbledon, he was in the Junior Wimbledon final. I think the listeners would be interested to know that he was just turning 8 years old, and you sent him to us. What did you see in that kid at such a young age?
Sorry, which kid?
Victor Lillo.
Oh, he was ferocious. I remember you saying he had way more funny bone than his backbone. I mean, he definitely had a sense of humor, but he had an intensity. When he came out. I made the mistake of playing him ping pong. When he was 8, and he cleaned my clock. And it was like. I don't know. When you look at young kids, I mean, I think there are a lot of kids that are talented, but he was passionate. I mean, he loved being on a tennis court. I think when he was younger, he's probably much more on the emotional side, which he definitely seems to have, kind of matured. But he had such a strong passion. Of course, great athlete. But I found as a kid, he worked harder than most of the other kids. So he had talent, but he worked hard too. And I remember when, he came out and spent time with you, and, you guys spent all that time really building his efficiency, and it was great to see him play in the finals of Wimbledon last year in Junior Wimbledon. Yeah,
backtracking, national championships in the Orange Bowl and La Petite. Good example would be the tiebreaker test. Brandon started out, young kid by the name of Alex Cairo, who his family moved to Dallas, and he's worked with Dave Anderson. I remember the two of them being in camps together, summer training, and the tiebreaker test was a big deal. Okay, we're gonna have a tournament, so you get everybody in line, and if you hit the first volley cross court in the service box, generally we let everybody survive the first round. You could have big camp, you have 60 kids. And it was not a joke to him. It was like, I am going to win this. So that, I think that's what great competitors have. I tell people I've met all sorts of top 10 players, but I think of Welby Van Horn, Wayne Sabin, and Carleen Bassett. Those three, it's like, okay. I remember Carleen Bassett yelling at me for putting salad dressing on my salad. just very, very intense with... But the doubles, with Jason, would have loved to see my son Connor pursue doubles, but you figured out 20% of the money goes to doubles, 80% to singles, and then you got to split. You got to split the doubles. Plus, the way it works, if you're part of the big show and you have 2 good tournaments a year, you get to stay on top. It's very, very difficult to break in.
Yeah, and actually, as Jason was playing, that was where they were starting to really encourage the singles players to play in the doubles draws, which I think was, to try to get more people to come and watch, and also to kind of decrease the accommodation costs. And
yeah, I think that's
so it really started to downsize quite dramatically.
That's very unfair. I think at Indian Wells, where the players are playing indoors, and they're going to the beautiful weather in the desert, and the singles players rock up and go, well, I think I'd like to stay here a little longer, and they play doubles. So if their singles ranking is higher than the double specialist double ranking, they're in. So they're really, in some ways stripping people of their livelihood. I think it would be better if they came up with a way where every player played singles and doubles. I think it'd be nice if the marquee players, they could even come back and play doubles, like say Federer. That would be a wild card. Have the Fed come back and play doubles without.
Yeah, actually, at the Laver Cup, when you see like Nadal and Federer playing, I mean, it's amazing how they can turn it on.
Yeah, with Federer is the one he's really opposed to how you double the prize money basically, and you double the points. And I think it's the British have it right, where if you get to the quarterfinals, if you're in the last 8. That you had a great tournament, and it really just because you get to the semis, you don't necessarily need to double the points. Tell us about the last 8 club. You're probably one of the only people that has a mom who's in that club. I mean, because as a champion, she has, the Grand Slams. She's going to get credentials or at where she won. What's the last 8 club like?
Small. I think it's as you walk into Wimbledon, it's like on the left-hand side. I'm trying to think, the gate right near where Fred Perry is. It's a very small, when I think of when I went in there with her, which must have been about 12 years ago. Pretty small, very personable. And I think very often the players would actually go there to kind of get away from everybody else and hopefully connect with some of their buddies. Nice little quiet nook away from everything else. And, I think she went there as well. Same thing, when she'd had a lot of tennis and, want to get away from the noise, she'd go over there and normally connect with a couple of friends and tell some great stories. Great stories. I think they were much more connected in those days. When you look at the relationships between a lot of the players.
Yeah, just how they travel too. They're traveling by train, by bus, and yeah.
So are you only allowed if you've made the last 8 at Wimbledon?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess they have a bunch of different badges and permissions and whatnot based on, your prior history. But, you probably wouldn't see a backer or, none of the, very few of the singles players, but a lot of the older, players from way back when. I think Kurt Nielsen was one of my mother's better friends. Who actually, that's a story. Was traveling in a car, a courtesy shuttle with Kurt Nielsen, I think is his last name. Mm-hmm. And he was. They were talking about what their kids were doing, and he said, "What are your kids doing?" He said, "My son, is in America studying tennis, and my daughter is, plays tennis." She said, "What did your son end up doing?" Because I remember he was pretty good at tennis, but I think he was also good at music. He said, he started a little band called Metallica. And I guess he was the drummer of Metallica, if I'm right, if I connected the dots correctly.
I was one time at Indian Wells with Austin Krajicek and Raven Klaassen, and Raven's in the main draw, and he's staying in the big hotel, and you have the choice, basically, have a chauffeur, or they give you a free car, and if you're in the qualies, you stay at the Holiday Inn and you ride in a van. And I remember telling Austin, I said, all these men that are driving these vans are in their 70s. When you get in the van, take the headset off and chat these guys up. I remember one guy saying that he had started the company, the tennis apparel called Tail. And Mark McCormick said, "Hey, you need to sponsor this kid. He's going to do really well." And, so the gentleman interviewed him. And he said he was a good-looking kid, and he said he thought he was very marketable, but he's so quiet. And it was Bjorn Borg.
Wow.
I remember another guy saying to us, cash isn't king, cash flow is king. And I think anytime you get a chance to talk to someone who's older, you really should. And I do think that that's one thing that I really like about England is the pub culture. You go into a pub, 3 generations chit-chatting. I don't think that takes place so much in the States, the pub culture.
No, absolutely. I think sometimes they go in, but they don't come out.
I'm going to just. I know the drummer of Metallica, Lars Ulrich.
Yes.
Is it his father?
Yes, his father. And I'm trying to think of the connection. I probably got the name of the player wrong, but
not Nielsen, Ulrich.
Maybe it's Ulrich.
Torben Ulrich. I use one of his lines all the time. He was in Boca playing the Bill Reardon circuit. Jimmy Connors was a Maverick circuit when he was coming up in the 70s, and he was a little bit of a rebel, and he wasn't playing the ATP. And Torben Ulrich, he had this long beard and ponytail, and he's 48 years
That's
old.
who I'm thinking of.
Yeah, he's 48 years old. He's being interviewed, and the woman said, "How old are you?" And he paused, and she had to ask a second time, "How old are you?" And he said, "Yes, how old am I?" And he looked at her, he said, "Do you mean chronologically, spiritually, intellectually, physically?" Because they used to say he had the legs of an 18-year-old.
And they made that movie about him called The Wall.
Yeah.
Wasn't that one of Guy de Kermadec?
Gil de Kermadec, right. The French photographer. Dave Eddy is someone who really helped me way back. He's the guy who invented the tube that you pick up tennis balls with. He's 10 years older than I am, but he was teaching tennis of all places in upstate New York. And that's where I was really exposed to, you can make a living in the tennis world. And he said he was at Roland Garros, and he just every once in a while it was dark, and he'd hear a ball be hit. Another few minutes would go by, and he'd hear a ball be hit. And it was Ulrich had one ball, Torben Ulrich, and he's out on the court hitting serves in the dark. No, he had studied philosophy and poetry and religion.
No doubt great players liked a lot of repetition.
Yeah. With so many things go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, I think just coming back to the last 8 club, I mean, just a really, unique, cool story that you have there. I think just one comment on Wimbledon is just the traditions. And then, of course, juxtaposed to that is, our Grand Slam at the U.S. Open.
Yeah.
I know you're not far from the U.S. Open where you live, and I'm sure you've been back there in recent years. But the last time I was there a few years ago, I feel like they've kind of almost destroyed all the tradition. Obviously the stadium, Arthur Ashe, has been around for a long time, but then they've gotten rid of all the old courts. I mean, it doesn't even feel the same anymore.
No, it's very different. I think also the comparing Wimbledon to the U.S. Open. I mean, Wimbledon, you really feel like you're going to a country club. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like no advertising, no promoting. I mean, you feel it's almost like an English country garden. And I think, the U.S. Open is more bam in your face. It's very, very commercial.
Yeah,
very, very commercial.
In introducing you, we said you had 3 positions in tennis. You worked for your mother, worked for Julian, and now you're a club owner.
Yeah.
Now, tell the listeners about Julian Krinsky, where he has the 2 indoor tennis clubs, but he has this large tennis camp, and it started as a tennis camp. But I remember sending one of my sons to his SAT camp, and they have a program where not now, I guess, after the pandemic, but that was a business he ran for a long time where you could study to be a sports agent, had a camp on how to be a sports agent.
Yeah, I think Julian had a partner, Adrian Castelli, and I think the two of them, together, Julian would think of the possibilities, and I think Adrian could figure out pretty quickly, whether or not they made sense. But when I came out in '86, there were 12 courts. Julian would occasionally be on the court as well, so would Adrian. That was the entire camp. I think by the time I was able to get my own business, which was 2019, by that stage, I think they had close to 500 staff members. Julian came up with so many great ideas. I think one of the best ones was the internship camp, where kids would come from all over the world. He would set them up at an Ivy League campus, find out, obviously what their chosen vocation was. And, the kid would spend 2 to 3 weeks, actually experiencing, whether it was working in a charter school or very well thought out. But he went, Canyon Ranch was another one. He had a relationship with Canyon Ranch for 2 or 3 years, and there were a lot of parents that wanted to send their kids to a health camp. And then we would do the tennis. And ironically, I remember I used to go there and give brain typing, seminars to them, to try to get them to understand, the way their brains could, balancing out their brains and being aware of some of their strengths and weaknesses. But, he really expanded his portfolio. And then I think a lot of camps really got hit hard by COVID, because they were using universities and colleges as their base. Somebody like ourselves, where we, our club is our main base. I don't think it was easy for anybody. But if you owned the land where you were performing or teaching, you're in a much better position. But they really got hit hard, I think, back in 20.
Oh, Julian, big operation. I remember you had a fleet of school buses that you used in the summer. A cool guy. Here he is. Along with his partner, Adrian, operator of the camp, and he's driving a school bus. And,
that's how you got to meet most of the kids, yeah.
Yeah, and a Pied Piper.
Yep.
In teasing some of we had so many students that went through the tennis tech program. You went there early on, and so many people worked for Julian that we trained. And with Julian, the inside comment was, with Julian, the customer's always right, and with me, the customer's always wrong. Because at tennis camp, it's more of an experience. I one time was at a PTR function. He was speaking, I was speaking, and I walked in, and I was hustling to get to his presentation, and such a smooth delivery. So I walk in, and he just changes his, his thought process and says, what Steve does is an education. The lane that we're in now, we have a pretty captive audience because, I've been working out of Brandon and Ellington's facility and all the contracts they have. And I've been here going on 5 months, and I've worked with one student from Florida. Actually, today was the second student player from Miami came up, but with their little brother, actually. So now I'm up to 3. But I was teaching, and someone that actually Ryan Fleming had taught. And Ryan called me up. We're doing an immersion camp. He said, okay, if I bring an older student to be with the teenagers. I said, yeah. So a 70-year-old shows up. So his grandson comes out. And it's not the way we teach. It's not a problem to have a young 5-year-old come out. And we have more goal-oriented players that are, some of them are 10 years older, but we can rotate our students to teach. You go spend 10 minutes with this young guy, and you go spend 10 minutes with this young guy, and it works out like a charm.
Was Thomas Ulstad somewhere in that area at one stage?
Yeah, Thomas was the director of tennis at the Delray Beach Tennis Center.
Okay, I thought so, yeah.
Yeah, and his position at Buck Hill up in the Poconos.
Yep.
That was a big part of what he did. I don't know if he's still doing that, but I know he spends most of his time now in Sweden.
Right.
Was he a tennis tech? No, he was a little before you, right?
No, he was a tennis tech. I actually played doubles with him for a while.
Okay.
But he was a year ahead of me.
He never really could serve, but
No, it wasn't. Yeah, but he could win matches.
yeah, no, he was a big athlete. We would do the snow skiing where you jump from the single sideline to the double sideline, and no, he was an athlete, big, strong legs. We have a film of Vic Braden giving him a private lesson, but no, he was the director. He married Monique Post, who was in Tennis Tech.
Yeah, I remember it.
And then Michael Darcy, he was his successor. He became the director of the Delray Beach Tennis Center. Now we had a chat with Carlin Navarro, Wojciech, and Doug Tomlin.
I remember Doug.
Musician. And then another coach, Brent Wellman, that we've trained. All three of them are teaching at the Delray Beach Tennis Center. With, but Julian, if you just, points that come to your mind, one for me is that, like yourself, you had so many people. You worked with them for 25 years. As accountant.
Yeah, I think Julian was the king of Murphy's Law. Julian could make anything work. He had the most amazing ability to turn anything into anything. I think somebody said once, an opportunist is one who can meet another is drowning, can convince them they need a bath. And when you think of when you have 500 staff members and you have so many tentacles to your organization, there's so many things to keep like a finger to keep a pulse on. And he could fix some of the things that he probably had to deal with over the years. I learned a ton from him. Really did. Actually, Adrian as well. Julian could see the possibilities. He could fix things, and Adrian, very quickly could see if 2 + 2 made 4, or go in a different direction. But probably one of the best doubles teams I've ever seen. And their ability to handle crises in business.
I think the progression. You were training the coaches, but then you went out on a tour for several summers. You were working in Philadelphia, based in Philadelphia, but you weren't there in the summer. But they had a really long orientation. And most tennis camps don't have an orientation. But one year I was there. You go for 4 days and train the coaches. He had a young gentleman, my memory's right, he was from Puerto Rico, and he was playing the guitar for the kids. So then he did it for the coaches in the evening. And, Julian met this young man. I was so impressed with him. He said, "We need to make you part of the tennis camp." And he came to the tennis camp, and he's part of the orientation. And the thing was that basically the way how you become a great guitar player is you practice until your fingers bleed. And the kid had no lessons, and he just was self-taught and just was an incredible guitarist. But that's just the way, talk about imagination is we need to make this kid part of the camp. And then he did.
Actually, that was another gift that he had. I think Julian had a great gift to see talent, like to see somebody. He could very quickly pick out what a person's skill set was or what their direction was. And
I was going to ask you, with 500 staff members, and like you said, you touched on this just a little, the different tentacles. Anything that sticks out as far as quality control for all of that? Obviously, the orientations, the lengthy orientation's a part of that. But when you have
I think that each group, the head of each group, he'd have the center of the organization, but each part of his camp or his organization would have a very strong advocate. And I can just remember, even as the years progressed, with all the crazy things going on and trying to make sure everybody was safe, is the number of lectures and the degree to which people were made aware of the responsibility to keep people safe. They really put a lot of work into it, over the years. And, it's not easy, but I think the fact that they broke each camp into like a team, of educators and leaders together. I know I've heard a lot of really, really bad stories from different camps, but never heard, too many really bad stories from there. I think they were able to navigate that pretty well. But I think a lot of it was the training that they did at the beginning. and during. I mean, I remember we used to every week have like a hour or 2 hours, a week where everybody had to get together and go through things and check systems and make sure everything was working as it should. Lots of checks and balances.
A motto of Vic Braden, laugh and win. I used to tell Vic, I don't understand the laugh part. But the one thing is, if you're working camps and the people come in for a week versus like, okay, we're working with these kids day in and day out, year after year, and their parents are really laying it on the line for them, and the kids on the lazy side, it's not that easy a deal to accept. But Julian, like Braden, had the sense of enjoyment. I think it was so many reasons. You could say just sense of enjoyment, but also too, I think he was on a low carb diet, and he was for his age, very fit. And when Braden passed away, we put forth a great effort to purchase or save. We're going to donate the Vic Braden Library. So I remember going to Philadelphia. Julian introduced me to a few of his billionaire friends, and it just didn't work out where both of them were at the age where they said, well, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have stepped up to the plate. Now, not to digress, but off on a tangent, that the Tennis Channel bought the library. And Mike McLaughlin, we've interviewed, said that he just was informed that they're starting to digitize some of the old footage, but that really should be in the hands of the right people.
Yeah.
They have looked through it for, the documentary made on Laver, documentary that's upcoming on Arthur Ashe. But go ahead, Brandon. More on Julian and more on business.
Well, it sounds like there's...
Actually,
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, just coming back to having a hierarchy, having that accountability, like you said, heads of the program, the orientation, obviously, Julian being a person who could, have that intuition about someone's talent is really, really special.
No, it was.
And what were you going to say?
I think the way that also, like for instance, on the tennis side, there were two of us that used to direct it. Another guy, Arvind, who I know you know pretty well, Steve. Arvind was really, really good at organizing, and I would be much more on what was taught and how it was taught and how they put the groups together. But even there, like in recognizing similar skills and different skills that could combine really, really well. I think that was definitely something Julian was able to foresee and make a part of its structure.
Well, we'll have to get into talking about your partner, Vic, and the briefcase, the Fair State guy, and you're the tennis tech guy, so you get the ball hopper in there. Because we tried our very best, but we really were much stronger on the ball hopper side than on the briefcase side. But Arvind Don, I was in the corner at the tennis courts. I can just picture up on the hill. What's the name of that beautiful D3 school where his camp was based?
Whose camp?
Julian's in Philadelphia.
D3, I think it was Bryn Mawr College.
Yeah.
Haverford,
there you go.
Haverford College. Yeah, Haverford was the base.
So we're on the courts at Haverford, and I've started the camp or the training of the coaches with some local players from the junior program before the boarding camp or the summer camp starts. So Arvind's approaching the court, and I tell the juniors, I tell the instructors that are from all over the world, I said, watch this. I said, Arvind's going to come down to the courts, and he's going to switch the two brothers. I had two brothers on the court tossing balls to each other. And all the coaches were laughing. They said, how did you know that? I said, because Arvind is in the experience business, and he's going to make it fun, and he just knew that the older brother and younger brother, okay, let's switch this around. And I was just going to say, I'm going to create a problem and let the problem blow up and go, you guys need to be for each other. You guys need to practice with each other. So, sometimes, I had the background with groups to say, okay, make this really work, make it smooth, make it easier, make it fun, make it cooperative, is I'll switch the brothers around. But, yeah, he's another one like yourself. What's the name of the accountant is Steve, right?
Steve Robertson?
No, there's Steve Robertson. But what was the name of the gentleman who was the accountant forever? Tim.
Oh, Timmy Farrell, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people that would just work there forever.
No, they were.
That means something's going well. It's not in and out and quick turnover. And go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about your current position, owner operator of the Upper Dublin Tennis Club in Philly, right?
Upper Dublin Sports Centre, yep. And Tennis Match Academy is, our training component. But as Steve was saying, it was kind of unique. Both Victor Urzua, my partner, and myself, we actually met at Julian's. And in fact, Julian and myself recruited Victor from Ferris State. I love to remind him of that. And we became partners in 2019. But of course, his background much more in the management, which really, if I look at it now, really our positions have still stayed very much that way. Although we both share a very strong passion for teaching tennis, but he's very, very organized.
Sorry to interrupt, but not 2019, 2009, right?
I'm saying 2009. Yeah, sorry, 2009.
No problem. Yeah.
My bad.
No problem.
Exactly. You see the math side.
Yeah.
But no, it's actually been a very unique opportunity because both of us, having spent a lot of time studying, both knew that we had a lot to learn. And I think one of the great awakenings was about a week after coming to Upper Dublin as a partner. I pretty much understood everything Julian had done to that point that I had not understood before. A lot of the decisions you have to make, employees, the organizing, the staff. I learned a lot and got very lucky, to have somebody on the journey that is as knowledgeable as Victor is.
On the business side, on the club management side?
Yeah, I mean, I've had to learn a lot quickly. And I think that the two of us kind of balance each other out, strengths and weaknesses. I'm probably more the big picture. He's more the detail. Although we both, often, when we started our business, we decided to take the two words idealistic and realistic and try to use those to balance, like every business decision we made, because a lot of our dreams and things we wanted to accomplish were obviously very idealistic. But very often to keep a business running, you have to be realistic. And we really use that as our gauge in a lot of the decisions we make.
Actually, a South African, Raven Klaassen, his father, Joppy, we talked about having both of them on a podcast. His father said to me, I really respect what you do, but it's very idealistic. You're trying to make anybody you meet a tennis player. What I would do is pick out the few and the ones that you just know can make a go of it. A cheer from a football high school game. My son went to the Jesuit school, which is a little more expensive, a few more snobs. And there's Tampa Catholic, and there was a cheer. Tampa Catholic would score, and the Jesuit fans would yell out, "It's okay. One day you'll work for us anyway." And the Ferris State students, they would get in arguments with the tennis tech students. This was back in the 80s and 90s. And it was really a heavyweight against a lightweight. And at that time, when a tennis tech student would talk to a Ferris State student about forehands and backhands, I mean, it was, just our connection with Braden and Vandermeer and Van Horn.
Yeah.
But that's what some Ferris Staters, I shared that cheer with them. And it's like, yeah, okay, one day you'll work for us anyway. So you basically need to pay attention to both the briefcase and the ball hopper, not just be one-dimensional.
No, we do, and I think even in the training of our staff, and we had some coaches for with us almost since the beginning of the journey, and some of them not. But I think pretty much everybody that comes to work with us, you end up learning a lot. You'll know a lot more when you leave than when you came.
That's great.
So
I know you really embraced brain typing, influenced through Braden. I could go back and just ask, people that you played tennis with or people you were training with, Scott Stewart, those three Swedes, Tomas, and the third one, what was his name?
Johan
Svensson. Yeah. And Toli Marinkovic, but you could actually brain type.
Yep.
Do you use that when you hire people? I mean, tell us a little bit. I know you're a big fan of brain typing.
I think like anything, it's a tool, and I would always be grateful, having learned about it. And absolutely, I use it every day in coaching. Especially, in hiring, I feel like for a lot of the coaches, they've got to have a work ethic. But I think a lot of the feelers are much more empathetic.
So,
and understanding the plight of a student.
Yeah, we have a podcast on brain typing. You're an INFP. Is Victor Asusa, is he ENTJ?
I think so.
That's good. That should work then. Where an ENTJ, Billie Jean King and John Newcomb, they cannot not lead. But it's amazing how many leaders are ENTJs. You got to get the trains on.
And there are very few INFPs in coaching. You may have noticed. In fact,
yeah. No. I mean, I'm an ENFJ, where I like things to be organized, but the empathy, that's a big part of it. But no, it is a great tool. I think that's a great way to sum it up. Doesn't put anybody in a box, but and it's good to have a team where everybody's not the same. I think if you can have a group of coaches where you can have definitely P's and J's. I have to remind myself all the time. Yeah. I meet a 9-year-old and I'm just thinking, where's this headed when they're 18? I'm an N too, so I'm really thinking down the road. And I feel a kid's pain. They might be pained to be standing in place and do static balance, but I know the pain that they're going to face down the road if they don't have ball striking skills. And I've just seen it so many times. We don't advertise. I don't even have a business card, but we've had so many kids be number one in college tennis, and we have all the documentation say this is what they did. But we've worked with hundreds of kids that didn't get to the level where they could play college tennis because they weren't the long range thinker. And it's amazing how parents, the opposites attract, and the kid becomes a master manipulator. And
No, it is, but I think if you understand a little bit more of I can remember going into coaching at the beginning. There are 3 players that don't play tennis anymore from my early years of coaching, and I still remember their names. And I remember 2 of them were one ended up becoming the number 1 player in South Africa, and the other one, who was the number 1 player in South Africa, ended up never picking up a racket. And I always remember looking back and thinking, I wonder if I should have handled them both the same, because they were so different. And, for instance, Jason Weir-Smith's an ESTJ. And, I remember when we were out on the tour, is that very often he likes a plan, but he doesn't always adapt that quickly to changing variables. And the number of drills we used to do just to sort of build his spatial awareness, to get him to take a risk, have a little bit of fun. He'll laugh. We've got some good stories with that. But, I think sometimes even the type of drill that you'll spend more time doing, if you have a J, again, they don't always see the changing variables in front of them because they're so driven to make that decision early. And, I think it's definitely helped me a lot in coaching and in just seeing, that this particular player, I'm going to go in a slightly different the goal is the same, but, might just go in a different direction.
Why is it that you said there's not many, or at least in your belief, there are not many INFPs in coaching?
Maybe I think it was sensitive idealist. I think that a lot of the time in cracking the whip, I know for me I can do it, but I'm probably much more in tune with how people feel than necessarily how they think. I remember watching Cedric Pierline, who was an INFP, playing at the US Open. I actually went to watch him in the finals. I remember him framing 2 balls going up to the top of the stadium, and I thought to myself, I know exactly, what he's thinking right now, what he's, kind of what he's going through. But, I think a lot of the time, look, in coaching, it definitely helps to be extrovert. When you're around people all the time, if that's energizing you and a lot of your energy is coming from being around people, that really helps. I think, the ability to think. If you're a dominant thinker, it's easier to make objective decisions. I say easier, you're more driven towards doing it. But I think, like Steve says, like kind of knowing the different, in some ways it liberates you because you know what you have to work on,
Right.
Very strong feeler, sometimes, hey, I'm being a little bit too soft on this decision, or, I'm figuring too much feeling, just make a decision, be a little more objective. But I find, especially with kids, probably as an INFP, when I walk out there, if I see a kid, who is very introvert, a lot of the time I will make extra amends to try to help that kid, to help shape their perception and how they see things and kind of bring them out.
Yeah, that's a huge positive. Is there anything you think over time, do you think that, say, all the experiences you've had with working with kids and teaching tennis, have you become more extroverted?
100%. But I think it's more learned than natural. I mean, still the natural inclination. When I get in the car after I've spoken to you guys, I will switch off completely, recharge. And I thought that was one of the best parts of Neednoggle, when he put it together. The introvert didn't necessarily mean shy and retiring. It meant that you can do lots of things, but you have to recharge. And that's why I think, like, especially as a coach, if you're an E, you can go from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. Not that an introvert can't do that, but definitely an extrovert has the natural ability, to keep going.
I think the INFP, I like the Bear Bryant story, the legendary football coach from Alabama, where he got all his assistants in the room and said, I'm sick of being the only grizzly bear here. I'm working with too many teddy bears. And I've called you a teddy bear before.
Yeah, you have.
With Roberto Calla is back here helping, and he worked with me for 15 years. I think I've known him 20 plus. Very, very quiet guy. We have this book narrative on our website page called Journey to the Truth, and there's a chapter about Roberto. And Barry Hint wrote that he can roar like a lion. So he never, very quiet. So just a side story that we need to get another Toyota Sienna. So today I picked up a Toyota Sienna, which is not easy to do, but I was just going to get another Honda, and Roberto roars like a lion. Get a Toyota.
Is that Roberto who used to be with you in Hillsborough many years ago, and he had like a big passion for soccer?
Oh,
when Chad Berryhill was in the picture.
Yeah. So he's like, to me with soccer, I know Flanagan knows him really well. He's like Bobby Orr. He's just amazing magician with a soccer ball. But yeah, he's. I
actually introduced Roberto yesterday to our general manager here, Glennon, and I said, "This is Roberto. He was one of our coaches in Tampa, and he's also the best soccer player I've ever met."
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. You'd have to tell me, he was a player from your program. You've sent so many people to me. This young guy, his first name is Josh. I get it going. He used to love Roddick. I mean, he wore his clothes.
Josh Rottenberg.
Yeah. His father was a hockey goalie. So we have a soccer game going, and little kids and big kids. I remember Jeff Lewis, great guy. He felt so bad. He just kicks the ball hard as he can, and little 8-year-old girl was playing. She broke her arm. Parents were really cool about it. So anyway, Josh is just too into it. He's getting too rough with all the little kids. And Roberto, he tells him once, tells him twice, tells him a third time. And I didn't watch that often, but once cell phones came out, it was like, okay, I'll make phone calls and I'll walk around the soccer field watching this, being entertained as I'm on the phone. And next thing, I just look over and Josh is flipping in the air and he lands right on his back. And he handled it so well, he got up, he goes, Roberto, you have to show me how you did that.
He's actually he's a newscaster now.
Yeah, down in Alabama. Yeah.
He's been all over.
No, Robin Anderson was there playing, and he got all excited watching her play, and he called up, and he just said, I want to get back in tennis. And I think after some phone calls, he was so far down the road with his career. It's amazing how many students work for Julian Krinsky, and then how many students that you sent to us. So many kids from mainline Philadelphia. I mean, they wanted to be an astronaut, be a senator, be a Harvard graduate, be a Wimbledon champion. taken all AP classes, just some super achievers. And it's like, I remember two young boys that their father ran 3 miles every day. And these guys just never ran. And they both fell short of playing. They worked hard and they hit the ball well, but they just didn't have the miles on their legs. I think it's so easy to go back in time and just think, okay, this kid and that kid. And it's actually such a privilege to be a teacher, and you learn so much through your students.
No, absolutely. Do you remember Vivek Stalem?
Yeah.
So I always remember one of the most simple, really powerful stories is that he came down to train with you. You took him out to somebody took him to the supermarket to get him to pick up his food for the week. He came back, and I think there were a couple of guys there from one of the East Bloc countries. And every morning he woke up, they had taken all his milk and all his cereal. And I think this happened for 2 or 3 days until he said something to you, and you turned around to him and said, Vivek, if somebody takes your milk and cereal, you got to tell them not to take your milk and cereal. And it kind of like changed the kid's life. It's like, whoa, I never thought of that. And you look at these kids sometimes that are so smart and so bright, but, so many of like the life lessons of,
Yeah, you went to Georgetown, right? With,
no, he went to,
Bowdoin?
I think Carnegie Mellon.
Carnegie Mellon. Okay.
Yeah, and he's in the financial world, doing very, very well.
With maybe I should get him on that 22.2%. I'm supposed to collect that from all my students. Vivek, I believe Vivek is the person who, the way he hung on a broom, and he walked backwards and he swept between his legs, walking backwards. So we cleaned this place with 6,000 square feet. Brandon knew the place well, and we cleaned it on a Sunday afternoon, and then Monday, I tell everybody, we're getting up early tomorrow, half hour early, and we're cleaning the house again. Everybody's looking at each other. Place is spick and span, and we just wanted to get the camera ready to film this guy sweeping. It's interesting. Somebody comes, they'll stay with us for 2-3 weeks, 24/7. And in a lot of ways, we know more about the kids than the pros just working with them after school. It's amazing. Parents don't know how much they do for their kids. They don't know how to take out the garbage. They don't know how to, get peanut butter off a knife. I think it's time for me to try to find a way to just get back in total tennis education. I guess maybe I was never just in that, but Brandon started with Upper Dublin. That's a big operation when you talk about 10 indoor courts. That's 10
indoor courts. Actually got 4 clay courts in 2 different bubbles. So it's about 10 acres. About 13 full-time coaches. Have a sports turf in the back. We have a gym. But yeah, there's a lot of moving parts.
A fitness center type gym?
We do.
We
do. It's just a small boutique gym. But actually, even the name Sports Center was, originally when realizing that we have quite a lot of land here, is trying to go into other areas as well. We have quite a few like lacrosse teams and soccer teams and what have you that use our turf to train on. In fact, we even have lacrosse teams occasionally on a weekend that'll come and play in our turf on the clay. It's great for the clay; it aerates it. The cleats, so that worked out well.
With it's got to be a whole different mindset to think about replacing the roof or something like that. That's a little bit more of an overhead than the overhead that you got for years.
No, I mean we got hit really hard by that hurricane, so we're actually in the process of doing exactly that. But yeah. The club was built in 1968, which, interestingly enough, it was built purely for tennis contracts. So I guess back in 68, so many people wanted to play tennis. I think there was one coach here, and they had 6 indoor tennis courts and 6 indoor racquetball courts. And pretty much a person at the desk who would just check them in for their contracts because that was the only way you could play tennis. And, now when I think probably contracts are maybe 15, 20%, and lots of coaching and, a lot of stuff going on with the academy.
And what about pickleball?
Pickleball, somebody asked me the other day how my mother would feel about pickleball. And it's interesting. I think she would say she loves the fact that racket sports are becoming competitive in the mainstream. But definitely down where you guys are, and really like on the West Coast, I was there like a couple of weeks ago. And I mean, the one place had 64 pickleball courts, over 1,000 people playing there a day, and only 2 people administrating it, which kind of reminded me of the way contracts used to be. But there are definitely a lot of people playing pickleball. But I think racket sports, as a whole, padel is becoming so popular all over the world. I know in South Africa they're building courts left, right, and center, and it really looks like tennis has been on a big uptick, since COVID started.
No, someone said the other day, I think it was Brandon's general manager, that he told me there's 4 hours of pickleball on the tennis channel, and that the tennis channel may become the racket channel, or even the USTA national campus may become a racket center, not a tennis center. But yeah, I'm all for pickleball. An associate of Brandon's gentleman who has 5 squash courts right here in the neighborhood of the FM Tennis Performance Center. He said what he didn't like about pickleball is it's invading tennis. But I think if you can't beat him, join him. Now, I don't understand that much about it. I went to one pickleball clinic, and someone reminded me again that you can't go past that line they call the kitchen. But I think that the people that we're teaching, I think is a way to bring the volley back to tennis, is have tennis kids sign up for pickleball money tournaments. Let's just show up and you serve underhand, but it's very much your mother could expand upon Althea Gibson and how she started with the perforated paddle and played not platform tennis but paddle tennis, and what a great way to learn to volley. So I live right next to this park, and I mean it's packed with people playing pickleball. And there are a lot of people. Basically, most of them are people my age, between 65 and dead. But I think to get young people playing it, you can't beat them. Join them. Padel.
I think on the west coast of Florida, I think they're actually starting to introduce it into the school system as well.
I've seen padel played by basically beginners, hackers. But I've only seen it, on TV or on YouTube. Would you consider? I mean, what would you have to do to have that at your facility?
I don't know. One of the biggest academies in Philly, HBTA, I think they had 8 courts at Riverside, and I think they've taken 4 of them away to turn them into padel courts, which I honestly hadn't heard too much about padel before that. But, after hearing that, it's definitely growing. Jason Ware-Smith, we were talking about earlier on, that I used to coach, is now the director at Westtown, which I guess is the Flushing Meadow, the old US Open. And he got the job, I think, about 9 months ago, but he was saying that they, no longer really hire a tennis coach. You have to be a racket sports director. And he did I think it was like a full week course on all the different racket sports. So that nowadays, if you're looking for a job in a country club, you're probably going to have to teach at least paddle, padel, pickleball, tennis, and if you're on the East Coast, probably squash. So you're more of a racket sports director.
I was one time director of racket sports for TCA Midtown Tennis, and I was asked about squash. I said, I can spell it, but I can't cook it. And so what I did was I hired the coach from Cornell, he wasn't too far away, and he trained actually Joe McMahon, who Brandon and I both know. But yeah, Forest Hills, that's a cool place. It could use a little TLC, a little tender loving care, old facility, but it wasn't too long ago. Somebody who I've met through Arvind Arvindan, Ram Ramanathan, I was with him at the US Open, and said, you and I are getting on a train and we're going to go to watch the finals, the World Team Tennis Finals. And that year, Klaassen, he got the MVP award and his team won. And then had him sit down and talk to Raven. But yeah, actually talking to something that we should still do is we should secure a college campus or a prep school and and they have a camp. Someone said that, we may have the largest tennis school in the U.S. with all these coaches that we've trained.
Yep.
But it'd be good to have a way. We've always talked about having a reunion. One year we talked about having it at the U.S. Open, and found out that that's really the worst place to do it because the cost of being in the city, people stay all over the city, and then everybody wants to go watch a certain match. What's coming up is something I like to watch. I don't watch basketball at all until it's the Final Four. And the Final Four, they have a great coaching convention. But why it works so well is they know that they've got the two semifinals and the final. And so everything else works around that. That's what makes it very difficult for parents. When you get into tennis and your kid plays, the whole weekend is gone. It's not like your kid's playing soccer and the game starts at 2 and you're done at 5.
No.
But it just keeps going and going because there's singles and there's doubles and there's rainouts and it's very, very interesting. Go ahead, Brandon.
Coming back to your club in Philly, would love to hear a little more about your junior academy.
We probably have about 300 plus kids, anywhere from like completely new to tennis, through to our select program, which are most of those kids are going to be playing college ball. So we're pretty diversified, within the different groups, and each group kind of has a leader who really understands the needs of the kids that they're with. Probably unlike any place where there's warm weather. I mean, it's such a battle for courts. I was saying to Steve a while ago, like trying to get kids to hit enough balls, is always a challenge for us on the East Coast. And I think that one of the things that actually does make things work is, for a lot of kids, they have to play in a lot of different places to get good. I think we're probably about as close as you're going to get to being able to do everything in the same place, having the gym. And we're pretty close to the turnpike, so we do get some kids coming through from New Jersey and different places. But, it's so tough to hit enough, to do enough reps, out here. And, sometimes the only way kids can do that is to get up really early in the morning. One of the things that's very strong in our area is academics. I think this is one of the best academic areas you can be in. So parents definitely, have the approach where kids are 100% students first, and athletes second, which I absolutely agree with that. So we have all the different ranges. I think we've had about 48 kids in the last 12 years that have gone on to college ball. Anywhere from quite a few of the kids go to Division III, Amherst, Williams. But, all these kids are really, really smart, but they also, we hope that they leave us with a very strong passion to continue playing tennis and desire, to want to compete and play.
One thing with Division III, Peter Smith, who coached USC for so many years, I think he was at Long Beach State before that where he played. Could be off on that, but he said Division III, that's the real soul of college tennis. There's no recruiting. I tell kids in Division I, I say, okay, the coach runs a 3-hour practice, but then he spends 4 hours in the same day trying to get someone to take your place. In Division III is very competitive, especially at the top. And when you think of some Division III teams can beat Division I teams with, but you have to do so well as a student athlete. So you don't have that many, I don't like the term homeschoolers, the non-traditional scheduling, like say your club probably a little slower between 11 and 3. So you don't have that many kids that are homeschooled?
No, in fact, we don't have any kids that are homeschooled. We have a lot of ladies, a lot of adult teams that play in the mornings. So I think we had something like 48 different teams playing here, within a year. So really, there are a number of different things going on at the same time. Most of the junior training is in the afternoons. Some of them early morning, and obviously very heavy on weekends if they're not playing in tournaments. But the other thing, actually, you were saying earlier on about, playing in a tournament, how it could take you a whole weekend. UTR events seem to be becoming more and more popular, and a much easier way to go somewhere for 3 or 4 hours, get 2 good matches. One of the kids at the regionals this last weekend, I mean, it was so well organized, so well set up. We were able to watch all the matches. They were streaming them. But, you could definitely see where the adjustments are being made. A lot of the entry-level tournaments, where they're only playing to 4 games, they're shortening the scoring and, trying to make it an easier experience for the family. I mean, some of the families you have where there's a son and a daughter and they have to go to different parts of the state, you feel terrible. Like sometimes, the parents may not see each other for a weekend, in some of the higher level tournaments.
Yeah, I know you were Julian for 25 years. I'm sure it varied, but I thought it was interesting how he had the coaches just coach. The coaches weren't counselors. In other words, when the coaching was done, you were done. You didn't have to work the dorms and such. With your staff, do you have people that are on court work off court? I know that's perhaps idealistic to have someone be a floater where they can cover the front desk and cover the ladies.
No, we have, it's completely separate.
Okay.
We have like a management team. We have people that basically are trained purely in the desk. We have an individual person who handles all the contracts. That's purely their area. And actually, they've booked now. There are a lot of pickleball contracts coming in as well, which is very interesting. I mean, I think since August we actually brought in a full-time pickleball pro. Guy's excellent, but I think we have over 300 people playing almost a week, playing pickleball. But, I mean, there's one guy who plays pickleball for 30 hours a week. I don't know how the guy does it, but, some of these pickleball people have figured out how to put in the hours. They really play a lot.
Basically, it's wiffle ball. This is when I grew up, if you weren't good enough to hit a baseball, you could hit a wiffle ball. Then it really worked out for me. We had a baseball diamond in the backyard, and they came up with this huge bat. It was as big as a watermelon. So that's when I could start to hit when I was 8, 9 years old. Go ahead, Brandon.
Where do you find your role being mostly kind of day to day? You're still on the court. You're in the office.
I love being on the court. I think at this stage, like the court is really my sanity. It's my happy place. So any excuse I find to be on the court. I tend to join in a lot with some of the higher level programs, whenever I can, get out there and participate and join. So I probably spend about 20 to 25 hours a week on the court and would never want to not. I think if I stop coaching, I'd really want to get out of it, completely. But I must say running the club and dealing with all the different parts, I do enjoy training staff. I really do like people. I spend a lot of hours, talking to parents, talking to kids.
How about Victor Sousa? Does he get on the court?
Yeah, Victor is he manages the adults. So a lot of our ladies' teams, the team practices, the matches. So he's much more involved with the adults. But he's also very skilled we've done a lot of building. We've probably changed our lights 3 times since I've been here. We've gone, he's very skilled at being able to keep the facility up to date because she's pretty old. So in fact, we have 4 full-time maintenance guys. That's a lot of guys. I think when I was back with Julian, we had 1 maintenance person. We have 4 guys and trying to get the clay ready in the morning and they're very skilled. At least 2 of them are very, very skilled, where they can change things, fix things, build things. Mm-hmm. And actually, we're in the middle of building a couple of outdoor pickleball courts at the moment, which,
So you've known your partner, Victor, for how long?
About 18 years. And we were roommates for probably the first 2 years, which is pretty good. You learn a lot of good and bad habits in that time. But, we've known each other for a long time. And he left Julian's, I think, probably about 18 years ago.
Okay. Were there ever any lengthy or heated discussions about, say, for example, how to teach the forehand?
He became when we were roommates back with Julian, I really we started to talk about Vic Braden a lot. So in actual fact, now in our teaching, if you took a lesson with him or me, we both started following a lot of the same information. Ironically, like the meeting we just had this Monday was really going through all the efficiencies, like with a lot of the coaches, but we're very much on the same page.
You've been in Philadelphia for so long, and I know Jim Klein, Ryan Reedy, Nick DeVore, Steve Young. There's so many, and then that's just through us, but then through Julian Krinsky. Have you worked with the USTA at all over all your years in tennis?
I did. Actually, I was the head of the coaches commission for the Middle States for a couple of years. When I came out here and used to do a lot of I was quite involved with some of the sectional and national training camps. They used to bring me in as as one of the coaches. So I remember back Alex Kuznetsov was one of the kids that we used to spend a lot of time with, and Legacy, the old Arthur Ashe Youth Tennis Center. It used to be one of the main centers where we would train them. But
I remember from Philadelphia, correct me if I'm wrong, David DeLucia, who's at Penn with David Getz, and then you got Lisa Raymond, who the Bryan brothers used to call Money. They, back in the day, they were influenced by Julian to a certain degree, correct?
Yeah, David DeLucia was pretty involved with Julian. And actually, I tell you, he was really involved with Lisa Raymond, was Oliver Mesterly, was with you. I think Ollie was her coach for about 2 or 3 years, her and Renee Stubbs, before he became Mary Pierce's coach.
Yeah, it's. I know you had Ollie come spend time with me, 20-some years ago. Then his daughter came for maybe 3 weeks this past summer. I mean, with the pandemic, I have to stop and think about when summer was. But he has a student here now that he's helping out. He's a great kid. They both hit the ball so well. I mean, I think way back when Bobby Bayless, when he got David DeLucia, Notre Dame was never really as strong in tennis until they had him come in. He was a top U.S. player. Right. I don't really know him, although I've seen him. I mean, I saw him play in juniors and in college, and he hit the ball really well. And Lisa Raymond, she played at the University of Florida when Andy Brandy was there. One time I was with the team for like 3 days, and she only lost a couple matches. And I remember one was high altitude and kind of an upset up in the mountains up in Salt Lake. And, I think the University of Florida, they've won so many national championships over the years on the women's side. I mean, they just won a couple years ago on the men's side. But first thing I would do if I was the coach at the University of Florida, I was coaching the women's team, I'd say, okay, we're just going to watch Lisa Raymond tapes, and this is how we're playing doubles. And
she had a hell of a slice.
Yeah, I mean, she's top 10 in the world. I think that in singles, I mean, if she hit more top off the backhand side, but she just hit the ball so well. I mean, people, and we use the term great base. It's solid fundamentals. And, I think coming back to your mother, granted that, fence to fence, 180-degree swing, but years ago, people taught. It wasn't game-based. It wasn't action method. They taught. Now, here's the ready position. Here's the unit turn. Here's the backswing. Here's the contact. Here's the follow through. And certainly it was a 180-degree swing on a court less than 20 degrees. But yeah, that structure has gone away where there is no ready position anymore. Worked with a young girl today that she's got an extreme grip on the forehand side. So when she turns, she's not going to have an option on the return where she can have the racket set up where she could play a drop shot. In a rally, she can come in, take a conventional approach volley. And, look at Djokovic's ready position, or you think about Roger Federer's on the turn. So that old school, new school, there is no school.
Well, and you remember that thing Djokovic's coach when she came out to the U.S. Open. I sent you that article ages ago. She actually, first thing she did when she lost, when she was a player, went out and bought a Vic Braden book. Yeah, no. So you wonder how much influence,
No, I'm very thankful to all the students I've worked with, like yourself, and you sent it to me. So right away, maybe you sent me the book, but if not, I went out and got the book. Yeah, it's page 19, maybe page 17. I'm going to bet on page 19. And she said she was so fortunate, the childhood coach, Yelena, I should be able to tell your last name, so fortunate to lose in the first round because I went into the city and I bought tennis books, in particular, Vic Braden books. It's very interesting that I think Vic is, the late Vic Braden is still ahead of his time. That featured article, Sports Illustrated, people get a hold of it, they get to a library, May 10th, 1976, Tennis is in the Stone Ages. And I think it's gone further backwards than it was. Now it's, is doubles gone away? Get into some of these principles that you shared with us. We could get into it in length, perhaps another time too. But what would your mother think of watching one-up, one-back doubles? I mean, what would she think of kids just never taking a ball out of the air? I mean, I ask kids all the time, what happens first? The ball's in the air or the ball bounces? And a lot of times they go, the ball bounces. I said, no. It has to be in the air to go over the net. But what would your mother think of some of the lost arts?
I think she was always very visionary in her coaching. So she always had a plan, and her plan was to figure out a way to take away the other person's reaction time. So while she marveled, I'm trying to think of who the Spanish player was years ago. Not Briguera. One of the first players to use a massive Western grip. It was kind of shocking to her, but she's a huge proponent of moving forward, and the court goes from north to south. So she felt players could be a lot more disruptive. Federer was always very, not just Federer as a person, but the way that he played was very appealing to her, and absolutely taking the ball out of the air. She used to call that the air ball. The great player, that ball goes up, you're moving forward. And I think too many kids nowadays, that ball goes up, they're moving back, regardless of the pace or the spin. But
Alvaro Bentancur, I'm going to guess that he still had a great forehand in Columbia, and he's still at Saddlebrook. And I know that you certainly took players there to train when you were in Tampa. Have some of the younger players be with us, and some of the pros or players you worked with. And I remember him saying, Beresitegi, great to watch, great fight, but he just set tennis back 10 years. Because when people see that, it's like, well, you just have the license to hit the ball any way you want. It's like Jack Sock. I mean, the guy's got some Grand Slam titles in the pocket. And, who do you want to copy, Roger Federer or Jack Sock? And I think, well, I'm going to ask Jack Sock, whose bank account would you rather have, yours or Federer? But actually to copy Jack Sock, just grip it and rip it, just bang the ball. And, that he's such a gamer. He 80-0 in high school, never really played up, always played his age group. A lot of things people don't stop and think, let's go over the history of this. I had an older brother, and the fact that he was in the Outback, he's from Nebraska, then Michael Wolf in Kansas. He wasn't really mainstream where he grew up and where he trained. But the inner belief system of Jack Sock, he wins Kalamazoo, so he's it might have been 16s, but I think it was 18s. He won both in both age groups. He lost 1 year in the 16s. That's another story, but. He just walks right in the players' lounge, walks right up to Federer and says, just assuming that Federer knows who he is. And he goes, Roger, I know you're not playing doubles. Why don't you play with me? And Federer looks at him politely. He goes, maybe next year, but this year I'm just not playing doubles. Thanks for asking, though. Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, no, I think I know Steve's got some other notes here as well, but just looking back on your career in tennis thus far, what besides, obviously you've talked about the influence of Julian and the influence of tennis tech, transitioning from, and you're still on court quite a lot, but transitioning from being a tennis teaching pro to now a business owner, club owner. What are some other skills that you've had to develop during that process to make you successful?
Patience. More than anything is actually patience. Is getting a plan. Was it plan your work your plan? Is I think a lot of just like building a tennis game. You put in all that work at the beginning, and especially with us, a number of things, a number of decisions that we've made, have really panned out well. But I would equate it sometimes to playing in the French Open. You really have to grind, and you have to keep working at getting things to be where you want them to. And I think one of the biggest parts of it, I always remember seeing a picture of a duck on a pond. And when you look at the duck from the top, a swan. The swan looks so graceful, but if you look under the water, the feet are kicking like crazy. And when Steve, talking about Julian, I think one of the biggest things is that, when you have an organization, you have lots of things going on, the view to the consumer, very often is a lot smoother than what's going on underneath the water. Mm. And I think that's one of the biggest things of in the day in, day out grind is that a lot of people are not going to see a lot of the stuff that you have to see to be able to deliver what you deliver. And, very often if the only thing you see is the feet kicking underneath the water, you miss the swan, gliding gracefully through the water, which, I certainly don't think that business goes that way. But I think another one is turning things into opportunity. One door closes, another door opens. And being able to adjust, I think adjusting is, like, especially with COVID, is that you had to be able to adjust very, very quickly and reinvent, think of different ways of doing things. So I think, innovation is a big part of success.
I think studying, Lynette Federer, Roger's mother, don't show them the chink in your armor. To try to just dig and find out as much as you can about how he was parented. I think I mentioned, Julian, he rocks up and he wins the 60s with that sense of enjoyment. But, you got to love the battle. I'm sure
you got to love the battle.
I'm sure you in business, it's just like a match. Tennis is life is tennis. That I'm sure you and Victor could look back and go, well, we could have spent that money a little more wisely. But it's just reflective thought and going back and making some changes and trying to there's so many things about goals. I think a great line is, my goal is to have no goal. These junior players, I want to be top 10, I want to play Division I, and say, no, I want to have fun, I want to learn to play, I want to improve my serve, and just keep it simple. But don't you find that the rules of tennis and the rules of business are pretty much the same?
Yeah, I think actually the older you get, the more you realize that, by the time you get into the real world, tennis actually puts you in so many of those situations that you had to navigate. That really prepared you for the stuff that was going to happen afterwards. Getting ahead of yourself. I think of when I first came here, like after the first year, there was such a buzz, when I came in. It was like we won the first set 6-1, Then we started to have staff issues. Okay, second set, you're down a break. Now what do you do? And I think just that mentality of you got to do the work, you got to put in the work, and you got to stick at it. I think in when you look at the ups and downs of a tennis match, not getting ahead of yourself and not getting too upset about the last point. Nothing you can do about it. Just learn and move on. Take something from it and move on.
That comes from your mother, correct?
That was definitely one of her. Yeah, being able to forgive yourself. That was one of her pillars of her coaching. You got to be able to let it go.
Yeah, it's the next point. Don't fret over the last point. The last point's over. We have some core beliefs that you sent us from your mom. Why don't you elaborate upon this? Be a student of the game.
Yeah, I think that was really, I think, a lot of the Vic influence is that, anybody who's going to play, you've got to understand dimensions of the court, physical laws, is really immerse yourself in learning. And I think every time you walk out there, you're going to learn something more. That was a Julianism. He always used to shake hands with everybody at the end of a lesson. I remember asking him why. He said, because of what I learned that day. And I think it's always an ongoing thing that you're always learning, but there's no substitute for a great base in what you know and good information.
Oh, it's good to hear that. I know for years we used to teach people to always thank the students at the end of the practice, end of the lesson, because what an opportunity to be their teacher. With this one, Brandon, why don't you read this? Tomorrow never comes.
Sure. Tomorrow,
I can hear my sister laughing.
I can't do my South African accent, but tomorrow never comes. Never put off till tomorrow what you can do today.
Yeah, no, she actually it was that African proverb. I'm actually going to read it. Every morning in Africa, an antelope wakes up. It knows it must outrun the fastest lion, or it will be killed. Every morning in Africa, a lion wakes up. It knows it must run faster than the slowest antelope, or it will starve. It doesn't matter whether you're a lion or an antelope. When the sun comes up, you'd better be running. And that really, like if I had to say, that describes my mom. She literally, when she was 85 years old, no kneecap, on crutches all the time, fallen over 100 times. And I remember going back there, seeing she had like a miner's light on her head. She had her oxygen pack on her back. And I'm like, Mom, where are you going? She's like, I'm going for a walk. I'm like, what the heck? It's like, it must have been 7:00 at night. It was pitch black outside. It was raining and she wanted to go for a walk. And she had her full senses. But yeah, never put off till tomorrow. Never put off till tomorrow what should be done today. And I think she just, she was a doer. She really, really believed in that.
Well, the thing about South Africans, I tell students that, you have to be well over 60 and bald who use nicknames and name calling. But, I'll tell a kid, you're such a poodle. You are no pit bull. And, actually Spencer Johnson, who's going to UCLA with his father, he's on one of these podcasts and he's doing a mission now for the Church of Latter-day Saints. Johnson, are you still a golden retriever? And, but the South Africans, you're such a hyena. You steal food. So it's always good to hear that. Vandermeer would do that. You're such a hyena. You want to be a lion. I like that poster where the kitten looks in the mirror and the reflection is they see a lion.
Yeah. Well, the other one is the frog that, it's the bird that's going down the frog's throat and the bird is trying to throttle, or the other way around. No, the bird is swallowing the frog. Mm-hmm. Used to have it. It's like one of the things you had. It was never give up.
Right. No, we had that on a T-shirt, but actually at Seguzo Bassett, we had that painted on a wall. And yeah, so it's, I think it's a pelican, a pink pelican, and a frog. And
frog going down his throat. And
Yeah, the frog's a goner, but he's trying to choke the pelican's neck. And then it says underneath it, never give up.
Yeah.
Never give up. It's more important to be a coach than a critic. I'm always asking people to. I spent some time this afternoon with Carla Navarro's husband, Robert Wojcik, and I said, "Tell us about our podcast." He goes, "Oh, they're great, but they meander a little bit, where it's not, in order." But so we're looking for critics to have our podcast be better. I always tell people, eat criticism like cookies. One of Tony McGee, who played at Michigan and then he played for the Cincinnati Bengals. I had him talk to my son Connor and give him some advice. A guy who played at Michigan and a guy who's playing Ohio State. They still can speak to one another. And Tony said, you got to learn to hate compliments. Just be polite and say thank you and then move on. But you have to thrive on criticism. That's got to be your juice. But comment on that. Your mother said more important to be a coach than a critic.
Yeah, I think, for a lot of kids, especially younger players when they're playing, when they start to beat themselves up, it's them actually realizing the importance of learning something and moving forward. And I always think of that quote back to the tennis tech days. No doubt there's a field for critics, but I never remember seeing one in the Hall of Fame. It's much more difficult to coach and push yourself. It's very easy to criticize yourself. So, I guess it depends which way criticism goes. And I think, if you're going to be a great athlete, you got to be a problem solver. No, that doesn't mean not being honest with yourself, but you got to be, it's very easy just to criticize yourself, as opposed to trying to figure out the solution. And, one of my mom's stories was that when she used to go up to Wimbledon to play in tournaments, when she spoke to her dad, if she lost, he put the phone down. And, so he just asked her the question, did you win? She said, no, I lost. He put the phone down. And when she got much older, she actually realized that actually her fear of losing was that he would put the phone down. So, sort of got to the stage where, she realized if she could forgive herself, and actually I have her on video. I had some of the kids video her when she came up to Philly the one summer, for her to share the story of it's much more important, to coach yourself and to criticize, but you have to be able to forgive yourself a little bit to let things go so you can move forward and be more productive.
No, I was privileged to see some of those videos. That's great. Repetition is the mother of skill.
Yep.
Comment on that one.
Well, that year when I went back to South Africa, we was into practice makes perfect. And that was where I really hit her with, practice makes permanent. You better be careful what you practice. So, the realization, she was a stickler for detail, but that's where I think Braden really, really helped her. Because she became crystal clear, vertical racket face, tracking, low to high, it really cleared up a lot of coaching for her. So then when, she could see when people started to do a lot of repetition with clarity on efficiency, they just improved like crazy. So she was very careful with repetition to make sure that, like you were saying, back in the day, if somebody didn't hit the ball the right way, she would stop everything, until they did it the right way.
Going back to your time helping the USTA, people need to know Braden math. What would your mother say? What would you say? Collectively, how many years you were in tennis? How many years your mother was in tennis, and now you? That's a lot of years. I'm sure it's 100 easily. But what do we need to do to improve tennis in America?
I think that one of the biggest parts is letting people go through what they go through. I always remember winning and losing is confusing. I think kids have to compete like crazy. I think, depending on which level we're looking at, but I think there are a lot of kids who just they take so many lessons, but you've got to go through the school of hard knocks. The ups and downs, the winning and the losing. But I do think that, on the foundational level is making sure that people understand efficiency. The coaches are trained better to teach the right way.
Actually, on LinkedIn, not that I even know how to use LinkedIn, but I know somewhere on LinkedIn it says school or education, and I put down School of Hard Knocks. That's Mark McCormick. What they didn't teach you at the Harvard Business School is the School of Hard Knocks. To get that glorified document, the Harvard MBA, I know so many people that have that. And, one thing they do, which is quite interesting, is they study other businesses. We had a mom here today. She works for FedEx, and the Harvard Business School said, bad idea. And the same thing with Kinko's. FedEx bought Kinko's. The gentleman who set up Kinko's, he was told at Harvard, bad idea. A lot of people were very successful. They got to Harvard, but they left. They took their ideas elsewhere, like say Bill Gates. Right. With this is a great one: music, rhythm, and tennis.
Yep. The Blue Danube. I never realized. Actually, I realized very young that the Blue Danube was the rhythm of the serve, the slow to fast. So a lot of times she would actually have little ditties and little songs but probably the strongest one was the Blue Danube. That kids very often, to try to teach, once you taught them the shape of the swing, was trying to figure out, when to accelerate, and just used to use a lot of music and songs. Like, she'd have a lot of kids trying to sing a song that would go along with the slow, purposeful shoulder turn into the acceleration. But she actually sang in a choir most of her life, and that really built her appreciation of music. But she used to use it a lot in her teaching.
Can you sing that song for us, Mark?
Ta ta da ta ta.
Not bad.
So
do that again.
That's it, guys. You have to pay for the.
I told.
But no, the Blue Danube, even to this day. I mean, like when I look at a kid who goes too fast at the beginning, at the start of their serve, I'll go right back to that, to help get the kid understanding the rhythm.
I will go back to running camps with 150 people, but for a long time it's just been a two minivan operation, and a lot of people want to ride in the minivan that I'm not driving, because when I get in the van, it's a classroom. But I will. Okay, all right. Let's see if it's a good song, and just push the button for a few minutes. And so rap came on today, and I told one of the players who I reprimanded at a tournament because I put him on the backboard, and 5 minutes later he's walking around with his flip-flops and his sunglasses. He's got the gold chain. He's got the earrings. And I go, it was rap. I go, they're playing your song. But I was in the car with Roberto Calla, he really wants players to listen to classical music. I was doing a video session today, and I told some kids it's very important. The forehand volley, the forehand ground stroke, think of it as a song. The song doesn't change. So someone could play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, Happy Birthday on the piano. There's just so many different levels to it. But the song remains the same. The volley remains the same. Where so many people in tennis think, well, I got the basics down. I mean, there's quite a few people that you sent to me that they came to us, and then they evaluated the program. So this has been very good for the basics, and they shop and bop. And then some of them came back because then they started to be recruited, and someone says, oh, you were training there, you should go back. Because they just think they need to go to bigger, better, and go where the players are, instead of just staying right here and just keep reinforcing the base that you've been taught. You have another one down, picture's worth 1,000 words. Very, very visual.
Yeah, no, that was, like looking at our childhood tennis court, that everything that could be a teaching aid was a teaching aid. And, she just, I think the more she could show them, she'd really, again, once she'd become more Bradenized, pretty much every angle was drawn out on the court, the different zones. Although I think she might have taken a little bit from Peter Burwash. I mean, that was the other thing, is very often after leaving tech, you didn't always know who had brought up what, the different components of teaching. But, when I think of all the Welby, Van Horn, Burwash, there's quite a lot of Groppel as well.
Speaking of Jack Groppel, it was somewhere buried in our Facebook. We have 12, 13 years of daily content. We missed 2 days in 13 years. It's you and Jack Groppel. And I looked at this videotape, and I couldn't figure out, who is this? And Spann, it was you. It was a young, fit Mark Spann with a full head of hair. And I go, this guy can hit the ball. Who is this guy? And it took me a while to figure out who that was. The key in tennis is not just to win, but to make sure you don't lose.
Oh my gosh, that was huge. Yeah, all the Bill Jacobson. I remember when I was out there, Kylie was doing a lot of the charting and what have you. But her big thing was, in tennis, you don't win, you lose. So like very often when a point ended, she would spend a lot of time saying, she said this thing. She used to say, hey, "What did you make? You made a mistake." So in other words, most of the time that points that players could actually figure out their percentages is that the majority of the losses are really due to unforced errors, not forcing shots. So that was a big part of what she would instill.
Actually, two of our pillars, Bill Jacobson and Dennis Vandermeer, both South African. I'd have to ask for forgiveness, Spann, where it says, Spann, your mother won a Wimbledon title. You must have been adopted. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Or Tyler, who never had any weight problem. I remember being down, having the kids. We actually used a 17-minute program, stretching program, every day. Because, you think about having 120 people and all the variables, is that stretching program being 17 minutes. One, it was very good for the players, but two, it was like, okay, this is a time for us to just organize all the different stations that we're going to have. But I can remember, Tyler, keep your chin up, both of them. So actually, I brought a little hockey to tennis back in the day. Still, I think I do. Go ahead, Brandon. We'll keep going on this list here. There's a few more.
There are a couple more, but I think before we get to another one of these points, I think you just invented another word related to Braden. I've never heard that before. Your mother became Bradenized. I've heard Bradenites. I'm not sure I've heard Bradenized. I think that's pretty good.
Well, people make fun of it where they think it's hero worship, but they just don't get it. They don't understand tennis math. The dimensions. I get tired.
But you also, I was saying probably one of the Brandon, one of the biggest things my mom did was actually they asked her about 3 or 4 of them to rewrite the South African Coaches Manual. This must have been like 1994, 1996. And I said to I'm going to send Steve a copy of it. But I mean, the Braden information there is unmistakable. The vertical racket face, the follow through, the ready position. So in 1994, the GreatBase was really, there were a lot of coaches that were influenced by it. All those coaches that were there every Monday, after lunch, they didn't realize they were going to be writing an exam, but I think they all got to the stage where they appreciated the exam, which was based on Tennis for the Future. So, a lot of the GreatBase was back there way when. So I think when you see a lot of Go ahead.
I was just going to say, your mother would love to walk through this FM Tennis Performance Center, all the history on the wall. I did give Brandon a photo. We got to find it, where it's from John Zimmerman on the toss and how the toss is arc forward. We call it, you release it as a letter J. And, the way you hang onto the ball with your left hand, and how do you get if you're righty, how do you get that ball out in front? How do you get the ball, to the right, going forward? You ask people, what's more important, the toss or the serve? You take a survey, and they're going to say the toss. As where Vandermeer used to say, I give a $24,000 1-hour clinic on the toss. I'll take it in $20 bills. But something as simple as the toss, Vic broke so many myths, but, we need to come back. And I think Dave Anderson, who you know well, I think we mention that quite often. We asked him for a theme, and he said the movie Back to the Future. Tennis needs to go back to the future.
Yeah, I think it's
actually I buy up every I go on to eBay. I just keep buying Vic Braden Tennis for the Future, and pretty much anybody I see that is starts to become more and more curious about, as I said, just read this book. You'll never look at tennis the same. And really not much has changed. Like in terms of physics is physics. And I think that was one of probably the best book ever written on tennis. And I think one's got to keep getting it out there.
I think what I was going to say is very interesting. What you said is that all those years ago, when your mother, contributed to rewriting the coaching manual for South Africa, 90, 94, 90, 95, to say that, that's the GreatBase right there. I think Andy Fitzell did such a great job bringing the GreatBase to so many new people through Instagram, but I don't think that a lot of them would probably even grasp that that's the GreatBase right there. It's not, and that's maybe your frustration, Steve, is it's not great. We're not a great baser, solid fundamentals. But no, I think that's very well said. And it's great that's had an impact as well. Major impact.
I was in a podcast. There's so many. We say everybody has a podcast now. Everybody and their brother. Jonathan Stokey. You can learn so much by listening to people. He said, if you don't do it right, if you're not successful or if you're failing, just go back and do what your coach told you to do. Just go back. Something along those lines. I'm certainly not spot on with that. But, he certainly acknowledged the GreatBase. But one thing that he's done is he's taken clips that Andy Fitzell has made, and then he makes his own, which is fine. the information is getting out. But, in a lot of ways, there's no need to do that because of, Andy's lifetime with Vic Braden. That second copy usually is, there's a few things missing. But it's great to just have people, say, hey, low toss out to the right. Like right now, like people are talking about palm down like it's a new thing. Like, yeah, this is what you do on the serve. Like it's just been invented. And that's not the case. How about this one from your mom? Pay it forward?
Yeah, I mean, it would be you'd seldom hear her talk about something without giving the credit to its source. Which, look, at the end of the day, when one, pretty much everything one learns. Like me saying to you, I would not always be sure if I was quoting Welby Van Horn or, Dennis, or sometimes actually realizing what the original source of the information was, because sometimes, I mean, over the years since leaving Tennis Tech, I think one of the biggest things was being able to disseminate good from bad information. When you listen to somebody, you're like, okay, some of these conversations about the serve and how to hit a forehand and to flick and roll up, it's all of a sudden, okay, buddy, you lost me and hello. But in terms of, a lot of the great information, I know my mom, whenever she was teaching, would say, this is something that either Vic, came back with, or so she was very big at giving credit where credit was due.
With the beginning of our podcast, Andy Fitzell is really the founder. He started it, the podcast, and we're getting pretty deep into it, getting close to having 100 podcasts now. But of our 8 pillars, I was the one who worked with 7, all 8 of them, but Andy just with Vic. But we don't want to be a magazine. What we want to do is just keep reinforcing it, because there's so many different levels of understanding. And it's not like, it's not like we want to be closed. Well, we don't want to talk to that person. We don't want to talk to that person. But we just really want to reinforce the message. And I don't get tired of saying it. I get people to chant it. It sounds like mechanical prayer from Braden. The dimensions of the court and physical laws dictate stroke production. No coach's opinion or any unique theory. And if you go with that, you don't have too many arguments. In the end, the strength of the individual comes out. There's always individuality. Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, just here, as far as paying it forward, coming back to your mom's Monday meetings, the camaraderie. I think, again, that's probably something that's missing in the sport of tennis, is that, again, tennis being individualistic, and some coaches not mentoring younger coaches or being on the educational side of the game. You're seeing it more now with social media, Instagram, but a lot of that, kind of like what Steve was saying, the copycats. It's so much of that is still about ego. So
I think it was really cool, back in the day when I think of all those coaches that would come out on a Saturday. Some of them became very, very famous in their own rights, but for a lot of them it was the love of like she loved tennis talk. We all know who our buddies are that we can talk for hours, about tennis, but she loved to talk tennis, and there was a lot of camaraderie between those people. And, some of them were working only 3 miles apart from each other. So you definitely had a lot of competition between them, but the actual chatting about tennis and stuff that was interesting, brought everybody together. And that's really difficult to do nowadays.
Yeah, no, I think I like the idea. Give it away. With Andy Fitzell, make it free. That's what we're trying to do with the content. And we always say, well, these YouTube tennis gurus where they've discovered the 7 secrets of the serve, and they're going to give you 2 of them, but if you want the other 5, you got to get your credit card out by midnight. And it's like W.C. Fields said, there's a sucker who's born every minute. And now, with just in the U.S. is 300 million people, largest economy in the world. I'm going to get this out there, and the course is really worth $347, but if you buy it by midnight, you can have it for $99. And it's like, really? I like Bill Belichick. You know, he's got supposedly one sign up. You know, New England Patriots, do your job. In your job, if you're a tennis teacher, your job is to get people to hit the ball better. I mean, and then take responsibility. Dennis Vandermeer, be your brother's keeper. That's where we mentioned Doug Cash one time. He said, you know, using my name in third person, Steve Smith, he said, once you're a student of Steve's, you're always a student of Steve's. Because, you know, you're teaching tennis, how do your students hit the ball? And I understand, like, you know, you have 300 people in your tennis club and somebody's playing once a week. You know, they're not going to have, you know, beautiful, beautiful technique if it's, you know, they're just young kid, they're coming in, they're trying tennis once a week. But so the recreational path and the competitive path, okay, they're different, but the information should be the same. The grips don't change, whether you're a recreational player.
No, absolutely.
Player.
The biggest growing sector in our club right now are players new to tennis. And, you know, this is where, like, one of the challenges is they don't even know what tennis is, but they want to try it. So finding that balance between trying to get them to learn correct grips, correct swing parts, correct positions, but also trying to get them to experience a little bit of the game. You know, because sometimes the promise of the game is not necessarily going to, especially if they don't know why they're playing tennis. You know, like what was your reason for playing tennis in the first place? It's always bothered me how many people started tennis and didn't continue. And, you know, on the one hand, you can say, well, if you don't improve a lot, you know, if improvement is directly proportional to your desire to want to continue playing. Anything you do well, you want to play more. Completely agree, but it also worries me how many people try but never get far enough into the experience to stick to it.
I know you and I talked about it for hours and hours. Dennis Vandermeer used to say, you've got to get people to be able to rally. If they can rally, then they can get hooked. I think even the double hit, you know, stop it, hit it, just to get connected. Jim Lair, the sound of the ball coming off your racket, rallying back and forth.
Well, you were saying about pickleball, you know, like one of the things with pickleball, I took a lesson in Florida. After 45 minutes, he said, play. I'm like, no, I want to learn some more. He's like, no, play. Now, it's really frustrating to me because I wanted to learn more about it. But these people play pickleball because they can, because it's a wiffle ball and they don't miss. But then as soon as they start to play, then they become much more hungry to learn more. You know, so in fact, most people that take lessons for pickleball, not people that are new to it. It's people once they start to get up in the levels to then learn the nuances. But the game itself is so simple. You know, you can just play it with like people that have never played ball sports before can play it.
You know, Chuck Gill,
and that blows my mind.
Chuck Gill is a past president of USPTA. He's been in tennis forever. I'd say everybody loves the guy. I know now he's doing things with USTA Florida. It was a few years ago. I just saw him at the US Open, sat down and talked to him, and we're talking about pickleball. This is several years ago now. And he said, it's a casual sport. They should leave it a casual sport. Now, maybe the business at USPTA, PTR, and like overnight, those organizations became pickleball organizations. But yeah, for the people that were teaching to play tennis, you know, they could play pickleball extremely well. Actually, Spec Tennis, we need to have the people that are in charge of Spec Tennis on a podcast. Dave Fish, the former Harvard coach. It's a bridge sport. If people can play Spec Tennis, which is basically what Althea Gibson played, and Bobby Riggs started that way, and Pancho Gonzalez with a punctured tennis ball. They're recommending to play with an orange tennis ball. And it is that perforated paddle. They're a lot nicer than they used to be. It used to be, you know, basically just a wooden mallet. But I think that's a great term, bridge sport. Yeah. But a lot of times with people playing pickleball, I mean, I walk by this park every day and watching people play. Again, brain memory, they're not learning to swing very well. You know, that's one thing about kids going out and playing with a red ball. There's no science to, you know, well, the ball's going to be lower, you won't use an extreme grip. But there's really no science behind, you know, does it really work, the transition balls? And from my point of view, you know, we haven't really surveyed that, but kids still have bad technique, whether they're playing with, I always say, well, let's get a balloon out there. You know, let's make it so slow that they play with a balloon.
Mark, just I know you touched on trying to help beginners learn the correct form, and then also figuring out, hey, what's the reason we came out here in the first place? What's our motivation? And then even, I'm sure, giving them a chance to play and have fun. What's been your club's solution to solving that particular problem?
Is really doing a lot more studying on how 5-year-olds think, how 7-year-olds think, the difference between like their cognitive behaviors. Trying to get a kid at the age of 5 to do reps, very, very difficult. But trying to regress them to that, like if I go with Dennis's graduated length method, is taking them to the point where they can at least have some success to move them forward. Thinking back many years ago to even rolling a ball on the ground, a kid who can't hit a ball over the net, start rolling, have them roll the ball on the ground so they learn tracking. You want the ball to go from north to south, roll towards your target. So I think one of the biggest things that we're definitely getting better at, but is trying to take them back to the point where they're successful. I mean, a little bit the way, music is taught. You go back to the last note you can hit correctly. So one of the biggest challenges, with these little kids is even when they're doing a full swing, they can't rally with each other. So, using more of the graduated length method is doing a shorter swing. And as they move back, their swing gets bigger. Mm-hmm. Adding the final efficiency of a loop for power and disguise, but the loop would come last, but you would actually start from the contact. So at least they've got a contact point, and get them to get a form of tracking. So at least they can start some kind of a rally to get going. And look, again, if I look at all the years of coaching, I mean, I feel every day I'm a student of the game. I'm learning. But I definitely find, like you put a coach out there who doesn't understand how a 5-year-old thinks, that's disaster before we even started trying to teach them a grip or a swing or a contact.
Mark,
you got to know.
Go ahead. You got to know.
No, you got to know who you're teaching. I mean, you got to know who you have in front of you, and what you got to be able to pull out of your basket to handle that person at the stage they're at with their cognitive understanding and behavior.
What about Mike Barrel, Evolve 9? Tell the listeners how he's helped you out.
He actually came and spent a day with us, and I'd studied quite a lot of his stuff before. I find that some of it quite controversial with my background, but I also found he's very big on regressing and progressing. Trying to creating a drill at the point where a kid can be successful, and then moving them forward from there. And, I can say that for some of the parents that are watching our coach trying to get the kid to roll the ball on the ground because they're trying to teach tracking, we as an organization have to do a better job of saying to the parent, I know this doesn't look like tennis, but your kid is actually learning. Your kid is starting to understand the fundamentals of obviously you don't get the low to high rolling the ball, but you're teaching tracking. Yeah. So very often it's trying to simplify the task. Kids when they're younger have no spatial awareness. The ball could be bouncing and hitting them in the head. Mm-hmm. And one of the coaches, when I was working with the USTA, I got to spend a lot of time around was Jose Higueras. I always think of him saying, when you learn tennis, you learn with your hands, and then you learn with your feet, then you learn with your eyes and your feet and your hands. And that kind of really made it. Ironically, I'm listening to Jose, and who's standing behind me? Vic. This was in California. And all of a sudden, Vic recognized me, which was this 4 or 5 coaches standing around him. And all of a sudden he goes, Mark. And I turn around, and it's him, but we're listening to Jose, giving this dissertation on, eyes, hands, and feet. But I think a lot of the time, realizing where that kid is at, but really, at the beginning, very stationary and trying to get them to do some of the skills that still teach them efficiency. And it's important for them to fail, obviously, but also find stuff they can be successful at.
Jose Garris, the forehand volley is almost a continental grip. That's a good way to just stop the argument. Certainly the Bradenism, turn the racket 8 times, 360 degrees by 8. Every time you change the bevel by 1, 45 degrees. Actually, Tom Fye, thoughts are with Tom Fye. He's my age. He worked for Vic. He's had a heart attack. I have a film of Tom Fye. He was given the award the second year. Mike Carter got it the first year. Tom Fye got it the second year. This is when they were calling little kid tennis quick start. And Fye is such a Pied Piper. So this film I have of Tom Fye leading a quick start clinic, Vic Braden's filming it. And Vic said, "Yeah, you're doing a clinic?" He goes, "Oh, it's only 2 hours away. Hey, let me come and film it." And I have a copy of that. But no, I certainly hope Tom Fye pulls through. In talking about people, I always tell people, no, we don't stab anybody in the back. We stab them right in the stomach. Is not talking behind anybody's back. And also working with goal-oriented players is that we're making this a team. It's kind of like a family. I'm from a family of 6, and if one of the brothers screwed up, 3 older brothers, we all screwed up. We're all going to pay the price. And with some different names, what comes to your mind with Peter Burwash? I know he was part of Tennis Tech, then he became a very good friend of Julian's. You got time to spend with him. What comes to your mind with Peter Burwash?
Really thought the business side through. Pros that worked for him ran the gauntlet, which had probably not that much to do with teaching. And I look at most of the places that these coaches go to, but he really got them to understand professionalism. And I think his training, like back when, wasn't it somewhere in Texas? Something.
Yeah, he was in Honolulu for a long time, but then he was in the Woodlands. Yeah.
Yeah, Woodlands, and you had to go through like 2 weeks, and most people didn't make it through 2 or 3 days. But from your living habits to your disciplines, and I've met a bunch of these guys in like over the years at different resorts, and of course they have this high level of professionalism, but there's so little going on at the resorts. I often wonder, these guys are so highly trained, but yet when they actually get there, there's so little to do. And of course, resort teaching is an animal of its own.
No, and also Peter, quite a few of our students work for Peter, and when you're at a 5-star hotel, you have a captive audience, but then when you leave and you go out in the dog-eat-dog world, that's great coming back to your mother that she's having these get-togethers, and there's coaches that are working 3 miles down the road. That really needs to happen.
I read a bunch of Peter's books, he had a couple of business books as well, and definitely have taken, a lot from it. And actually, one of them was especially like working in a large camp. When you get all those coaches and all those things, is that you just have to fix it and move forward. Sometimes you can't go back and analyze something. Very often, it was just fixing something and moving forward. I think that was one of his.
Oh no, you were grinding on Peter Burwash, where you're going to show up, and this is where you're going to dress. You're not going to show up for an interview and be wearing a tennis outfit. You're going to show up. You're going to have on a coat and tie. We teach. It's a little more difficult for us to just come up with how the gals should dress, but the guys, have your khakis and a blue shirt and have a tie on, but be carrying your blazer so you don't come in and you're like, who's this guy? Like he's just totally overdressed. But yeah, service, professionalism.
Very professional, yeah.
How about Katie Schukelbeer with, I think, Kalamazoo, Michigan, the family, a lot of success, played at Stanford. What did you learn from that family? I think it's those are the hidden stories. Like, how did they do so well? You come from Michigan.
No, Jason played with her at the mixed doubles at Wimbledon, but they pretty much just, it was one of those things. She was looking for somebody to play with, and he was a pretty, competent doubles player. But I really don't know much about. In fact, I know very little about Katie.
Okay. Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, no, just coming back, I think, one of the great tidbits is and Steve just mentioned it again, the Monday lunch meetings. Mentioning again the coaches that were coming, and they were actually in direct competition with each other. I'm sure there's a similar situation where you are. I'm sure it's a competitive environment with your club, and you're competing against other clubs. And in terms of how you've developed it, what do you think is your competitive advantage over some of the other local clubs?
I think that actually after spending all those years at Tennis Tech, I have so many things I'm still trying to work out. I probably don't spend enough time looking at my competition. Mm-hmm. I think that we have in our area probably 2 or 3 clubs that really have their act together. that are on the ball, training their coaches, recognizing their players, putting programming together. And on the other hand, there are quite a few clubs that are so independent where the coaches just rent courts. Mm-hmm. And I literally see that as the degradation. Like it's the degradation of tennis. Like nothing's being developed. The coaches are just, taking clients from each other. But there are a couple of organizations that have really done a good job where I know the coaches are, proud to work there, but also the clubs are forward thinking, where they're trying to do something. And, they're evolving, but there are a lot of clubs that, we've just had 3 clubs that have closed down in our area, like in the last 2 or 3 years, like tennis clubs, which is concerning, but, property has obviously become a lot more valuable. And, when you look at it, but, I think, even as one looks at it, the teaching the professionals how to be professional and how an organization, I think of that doubles quote, 2 is greater than 1 when 2 can work as 1. When you get a group of people that work well together, they're going to work circles around the individual.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting with a brain type like you and Victor being a doubles team, basically. You can put an introvert with an extrovert. You got famous Harry Hopman told Tony Roach.
Yeah, I'll reflect a lot more than Vic. Vic will make decisions quickly. I'll reflect, and actually that reflection sometimes kills him, because before we were partners, he said he used to get in the shower every morning and just say, "Okay, am I going to do this or not do this?" Right? And now, some of the conversations can go on for 2 or 3 hours to make some of these decisions. So it takes a lot longer to make decisions, but we make much better decisions.
Yeah, the
balancing.
Brain typing. You first understand yourself, how you're wired, and then it'll help you out with others. But yeah, Newcomb, ENTJ, where Hopman told him, he said, let Roach think that you're the captain of the double ship, but you're the one who's making the decisions out there.
Right.
You're
Totally Marinkovic. Yeah, same thing.
Yeah, totally Marinkovic. You and I could talk about this character. He's from this former Yugoslavia, Croatia, Serbia. I'm not sure which, but so fast. Didn't have a really big serve. Tossed too far over his head. But boy, what clean ground strokes. And I just heard this story through mutual acquaintances, friends who crossed paths with Tolly. But he married the actress Robin Givens. And talk about strategy. He actually rented a yacht. And so she was on the yacht, and she didn't know it wasn't his. And, then he rented, I guess the story goes, he rented a private jet, and she just thought that he was loaded. So they get married, and he goes, I got to just tell you one thing. I'm broke. And this guy told him, so I was at a function, and you mentioned Johan Svensson's name, and his wife told me this, that Tolly took so much money from the team players playing cards, and the guys couldn't pay him. So the guys were doing his laundry. He'd go to the cafeteria, and one of the somebody on the team would go through the line, and he wouldn't wait in line. And then when he'd be done eating, one of the other players would have to take his tray up, and the guys couldn't pay him. He goes, "Well, I'll find a way for you to pay me." But yeah, that's one thing. It just didn't, think about just so many different people. We could make a list. We'd have to go through old photos of the JKST summer staff. And
Yeah, there are a lot of them there. There must have been probably 30 plus people.
Yeah, I was going to say 50 people that were connected with JKST. Go ahead, Brandon. We wind this down, but it's been great to talk to you. We certainly could talk to you again. What a journey in tennis.
I think one of the first things you said was yourself learning tennis as a 5-year-old, and how you maybe were one of the more difficult students to work with. And
disruptive is probably the right word. Yeah,
disruptive, and then just kind of a few minutes ago talking about how you've you've been working, well, if it's yourself or your staff, working with 5-year-olds, and the capacity for what type of learning or what type of exercises might be best. I'm wondering if you could kind of bridge those two together. I'm kind of leaving it up to you.
Yeah. Like if I look back, I probably have pretty severe ADD, and have had ever since I was a kid. And when I was a young kid, I actually only had one teacher that didn't punish me, going all the way through school. And especially in looking, like at kids right now, trying to recognize, that for a lot of kids, the journey of trying to figure stuff out, it's tough. How they see the world. You have a kid that comes out, you look at teenagers, all of a sudden, bullying and cyberbullying and all the stuff they go through. So I think, when kids come out and they come out onto our courts, in many ways we want to try to disconnect them from all the other stuff they're doing and put them in a really positive environment. But knowing who you have in front of you and how they respond, is really, really a large part of it. So, ironically, the meeting that we had this last Monday, where we're going through efficiencies, every group actually had to sit down and discuss the people that they were coaching. Who are they? What are they doing? Why are they there? More than anything is like the kid that you have in front of you. Why are they playing tennis? Why do you think? And we look at our tournament players. It's pretty obvious. And I would say something that to me has always been really important is that probably 98% of the people I've taught tennis to still play tennis. Like, it's always important to me to love it, not just to work hard, but to love what you do. Do what you love what you do. And the days you're going to hate it, and all tennis players, you're not going to always love being on a tennis court. But really important to enjoy, the experience of what you're doing. But, knowing where people are, and especially in their learning and how they look at something. You can tell anybody to do anything, but sometimes, trying to get them to actually do it. And, I thought, if somebody plays tennis, they're going to play it for the rest of their lives. So trying to get them onto the hook to play tennis for the rest of their lives is really important. So knowing where that person is in their tennis journey, really, really important. And with younger kids, knowing, a little bit of what their learning capacity is. We sometimes put younger coaches with the younger kids. And I've realized over the years, you literally have to have your most experienced person with the younger kids, because a mother, would understand what kids go through when they're younger, what they can and what they can't do. Whereas a young coach who does, may have plenty of enthusiasm, but really doesn't understand what they're working with, because they don't understand the person or their capabilities.
Really, in the end, they haven't pounded any nails. It should be flip-flopped, where Julian does a funny job. It's just funny the way he says, well, he coached on the tour, and he just stands with his arms folded, hugging a racket. He goes, yeah, I coached on the tour. And he just hugs the racket, and he goes, but I found it rather boring. You sent a family recently, and it just was a slip-up. Wasn't the end of the world, but the dad talked to me, and I mean, you've been so smart, just sending people to us who, they're really committed to being a better player. So
actually, the kids that came to you really grab it. They really took what they've learned, and actually, the guys, both the twins, are really playing really efficient tennis. It's very. So it had a very, very positive effect on them. Which,
but when they first showed up, it was like, well, this is not the Cub Scouts. This is a little closer to the Marines. It's not the Marines, but it's closer to the Marines than it is the Cub Scouts.
No, they're definitely people I would send and not send. Like over the years, there's.
Yeah, we don't kill them with kindness. The truth hurts, but the truth will set you free. I think one thing to end on for me is presentation information. So back in the day, Spann comes in, listeners. He's a good-looking guy. He plays well. He has all sorts of experience. He's taught. And we Americans, we fall for accents. So you were an out-of-town expert. You were from a long ways away, and your presentation was so good. And I just remember, putting the pedal to the metal and giving you an extra hard time because, because you very easily could have got away based on your playing background, the South African accent, the experience that you already had, because your presentation skills are very high. But I just remember, Spann, that's an A in presentation and an F in information. you said this, and this, and this. Don't
worry, my mother won't take it personally.
I remember on Group Dynamics with Vandermeer, for whatever reason, he tested me. He got me out on the court, and we shared this when we talked about Vandermeer. he blew the whistle every time I made a mistake. And it was like Tweety Bird. You know, every time I made a mistake, he'd blow the whistle. Boom, 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 boom. And yeah, but you've had an amazing background in tennis through your mom, you know, going to Smith and Vandermeer when you were younger. And then also, too, at Tennis Tech, you know, we feel strongly that what we put together is people need to really understand that the curriculum or the pathway we have. Yeah, we're, you know, certainly interested in new ideas and, you know, ways to get better. I think that's is very much available now through nutrition and fitness, sports psychology, but not so much in ball striking. But no, it's been great to have you on. Why don't you wrap it up, guys? We'll go with Flanagan.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. Would love to come up and visit, and certainly would love to have you down here and check out what we have going on down here. And it's been great learning about your background, your mother, of course, and all the stories and the lessons there. But yeah, thanks for coming on. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, guys. And Steve, I got to thank you actually for the project of, you know, thinking back on my mom. You know, I think like too often in life, you're so busy moving forward, but actually looking back and reflecting. And actually both myself and my sister really, you know, started to think about a lot of these things. And, you know, it's one sometimes forgets the well, you know, where a lot of your information and, you know, the person you have to thank the most. So I really thank you for the opportunity and for insisting that I write that stuff down. You were 100% right. Thank you.
Oh, you're more than welcome. With Canadians, the Canadian population, most Canadians live within 100 miles of the U.S. border because if you keep going north in Canada, it's the tundra. And because of that, even though Canada is so large coast to coast, it's amazing how many Canadian kids are around their grandparents and Americans are not. This Coco Gauff, just reading about her, and both her grandmothers were homeschool teachers. It's like, wow, that's really interesting. But no, that's one of the goals of the GreatBase is to carry the torch and, you know, tennis teachers from the past. Yeah, we could go into more detail on the work on the manual that your mother put together, and but no, you know, thanks so much for being on. I think one thing, and Vic used to always say that there should be a master plan, and I was flattered that you'd mentioned me, and I said, yeah, Vic, you go forward with a flashlight making new discoveries, and I go backwards hitting people over the head with a club. But we really should have a master plan. I think Brandon mentioned it through Andy Fitzell, his wife, put in a lot of hard yards, and more people know about what we're doing. We have some plans to try to, you know, really it's like our core is tennis intelligence applied, is just make that tennis intelligence applied 2.0. It's not like we need to do anything different, but everything that we've done, we just need to do it better. And the goal really is try to improve tennis teaching. And Rob Krychek, at one time, he heard Craig Tiley, when he became the director of player development in Tennis Australia, is that he said it's going to take me 10 to 15 years to have a network of coaches around the country, around Australia. So Rob Krychek read that, and then he contacted Paul Rodert, who's back with the USTA now. And you know, Rob, the meeting happened at that time. I think Austin was number one in the country as a junior. I mean, he was right up there. He won Kalamazoo. And, you know, we do have that network. You know, there should really be a master plan on, you know, I do think that, you know, we get up every day and as a group of tennis teachers, and we've got to, just like anybody, you got to do A. You got to do what's right in front of you. But then to have B and say, okay, how can we, you know, team up? I'd say we are a team, but, you know, to become united. And it would be nice to have a campus in the summer where it's like, okay, coaches can come, players can come, and really the parents need to be the ones that are educated in this player development. We say all the time, as a consumer, they're blindly writing checks. They don't have consumer knowledge. You know, Vic used to always say is that if people can afford tennis lessons, socioeconomic functioning level, unless they inherited it, they're pretty smart. They're pretty smart if they could pay for tennis lessons. Where Vic would say this, a lot of tennis pros can't afford their own lessons. Right. So there's consumer knowledge, but then there's product knowledge. And if there's product knowledge, there should be a product. And that product should be produced. And Andy Fitzell's always saying, let's just watch their students hit the ball. And, Vic used to say, okay, take the kid takes the ice cream cone, they put it in the middle of their forehead. Or they go to the water fountain and they can't have the water hit the lips. It takes them a while. But if you can still teach that person how to play, I think we have it so backwards is that we have all these merchants of flesh that are just recruiting players. They're hanging around tournaments and handing out business cards and the third base coach, and they're coaching kids who can already play a little bit. But no, the whole motive is, to try to help people play better, teach better. And but no, it's been great to have you on, and we need to circle back and talk to you again. But thanks so much.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah.
Be well.
Mark. Thanks again.
Cheers, Steve.
Yeah. Flanagan.
Number 84.
84 is in the books. I know people are listening to these. We get a lot of feedback. Had someone tell me they first started and it was just so boring, but then they tried to do some of the things on the court and go, this works. And, but yeah, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. And I've said after we get to 100, we got to take some of our supporters and put a group of writers together, have show notes and go just bullet points, from Mark Spann, boom, 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 because there's some golden nuggets.
Absolutely.
All right, Flanagan. Listeners, thanks
everyone.
Hanging in there. Hope you got something out of it. Adios.